illustrious Claude, who finished second on stage 8. Who will soar into the clouds and lead the charge into these ancient peaks? Can Team Discovery rally the troops? Stage 9 of the 2005 Tour de France is next on OLN. Looking across the beautiful mountains of the Vosges here in the Black Forest, you can see 3 countries, Germany, Switzerland, of course. We're in France, and it's a big day for not just the riders, but for us as well. We give you extended coverage as the race now stays live right through till we cross the finishing line in Mulhouse. It's going to be a great day out, 171 kilometres. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our coverage. Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen. Paul, it has already been a great day in many ways.
It's already been a very strange day. Everybody, I think, wants to go out and get this stage behind them because it is a difficult stage, the most difficult stage of the Tour de France so far, with a lot of climbs and a big climb towards the end, the Ballon d'Alsace.
Well, the race has been underway approximately 20 minutes, and goodness knows who decided to race, but they raced. At the start, Lance Armstrong looking very confident after his little setback yesterday. Santiago Botero all on the roll at 180 riders leaving the start line, but as we're shortly to find out, 2 riders have already given up. Then the attack started. Grivko of the Ukraine was not waiting for anybody. The first climb starting as soon as they made the start. Then came this big crash. The man most seriously hurt was Gonzalez de Galdiano.
He's a taller rider on the far side, and their 2 teammates were actually riding together at the back end of the pack. Galdiano did get back up, but in fact stopped at the side of the road a few moments later. But big Jens Voigt wanted to go out and set this race on fire, and he is, after all, Phil, second overall.
Well, this is the top of the first climb, the Col de Gros-Pierre, after only 6 kilometres. The man that took all the climbs at the start yesterday, increasing his lead in the King of the Mountains, getting the 4 points. Botero is chasing up behind him along with Michael Bogart. Galdiano did try to start, but it looks to us as though he may possibly have broken his pelvis here, because try as he might to get on the bike, he eventually had to say that's enough, and he's given up the Tour.
A man who formerly wore the yellow jersey in the Tour de France. This is no way to go out of the Tour, especially as he's heading into the terrain of Liberty Seguros at the mountain.
What about this, though, Paul?
Drama at the back, because out of the picture, just around the corner, Jan Ullrich had gone down. The whole of the team stopped to wait for him. And once we get a closer look here, we'll have a chance to see he bears the signs on his left-hand shoulders there of the crash that took him slightly off the road.
That's right. This was on the descent to the Gros-Pierre. Ullrich fell. You can see the blood on his leg there, and Tobias Steinhauser, the rider just in front of him. They all waited to try and pace him back. He got back, and he got back just in time to hear the sad news that dropped on the climb. David Zabriskie over the top, already far behind. He couldn't face another day on his own. He has abandoned the Tour de France, the first Maillot Jaune. Now, as we move back up to the leaders here, this is now the second climb of the Tour, the Col de Fain, 22 kilometres. This was literally moments ago. And these are the riders chasing the 2 leaders, because Michael Rasmussen up front, joined now by Dario Cioni and a group of some 7 riders getting themselves together behind. But on that first climb, the peloton was reduced to a handful of men. They have regrouped somewhat now.
There weren't very many men left at all there at the top of the first climb of the day, and that was all because of the severity of the attacks that were unfolding. It would seem that Team CSC have got a very serious plan here this afternoon. They've got big Jens Voigt in the group off the front of the main field, and there's going to be attacking, I think, right the way to the end. We've just caught a glimpse of Bert Zeberg of Team Gerolsteiner going away. I think everybody will throw caution to the wind here this afternoon, Phil, because after all, tomorrow is a rest day.
Well, it's an amazing start for what is a really hilly day, and we've still got the Grand Ballon and the Ballon d'Alsace, the 2 big mountains to cross today. They're up front there. We are going to have a lot of fun and games with you watching the start to finish virtually of the race today as we continue our extended coverage, and in a most beautiful part of France. They're free to fly today, and it looks as though that's exactly what they want to do. Quick resume for you. Up front, Michael Rasmussen of Rabobank, Dario Cioni being chased by Jens Voigt, Zabio Zandio, Alexander Moose, Angel Vicioso, Christophe Moreau, Inigo Landaluz, the man who was the surprise winner of the Dauphiné Libéré, and then comes Bietzeberg just ahead of the pack. Here's the two leaders.
These are the two leaders. The man at the front is the man who, before the start of the Tour de France, said that he wanted to win the King of the Mountains classification this year. He was third last year behind Lance Armstrong, and of course the man who won it for the 7th time, Richard Virenque, now retired. David Dario Cioni is the man who joined him just a couple of kilometers ago. He's a long way down in the overall classification in 54th place, but he's a bike rider who, over the last couple of seasons, Phil, we've seen riding high in the overall classification of races like the Giro d'Italia.
Well, we didn't quite see the black board there. It's a green board, really, as he went up to the riders, but we'll find out very shortly the gap. Michael Rasmussen up here as well. He's only in his second Tour de France. He's already made no secret of the fact he's going to be the King of the Mountains by the time we get to Paris. Well, he took the lead yesterday, and he's built on that now because he's won the first two climbs of the day.
Important for him. I think the main field now starting to regroup on the descent. We have got an awful lot of climbing to do on today's stage, and there is hardly any flat on the course at all. Three third category climbs very early on, then a very difficult second category climb up to the summit of the Grand Ballon before a long descent, and then I think we will see the main field really start to split on the Ballon d'Alsace. A quick glimpse there of the yellow jersey and Lance Armstrong, and again it looks like there's another little problem at the back here with the man who finished second yesterday, Andries Kloden.
Well, Kloden's having his troubles today. I wonder if Lady Luck is going to smile on the rival. Oscar Sevilla, that, who's pulling off from the road now as he moves away. And they've all had all sorts of trouble today. T-Mobile, Jan Ullrich has been down, but certainly not out. He's back in the field after a good chase. The team are ready for that. They waited for him, didn't panic, and he came back up. Well, we've had two climbs already, and we've only done about 25 kilometres. When we come back after the break, it'll be the Col de Bramont. That's the next hill on the menu, and this is a race today. We'll be back. Well, we're not even 32 kilometres into today's stage. We've been over two cols already. The rider in the polka dot jersey has won them both. Michael Rasmussen. Dario Cioni caught him after the first climb. Has gone over second on the second climb, the Col de Fen. And these two holding about a 2-minute advantage on the peloton. Well, 3:27 it's up to now on the peloton. The little yellow jersey there indicating where the race leader sits. That, of course, is still Lance Armstrong. A couple of minutes back to the first chase group, which is in fact some 6 riders now. So this is looking extremely as though it's going to be a hard race today. Let's have a look at our AMD facts of the climb of the Col de Bramont. 3.4 kilometres this one now. Takes us up to nearly 1,000 metres, just on 3,000 feet. Average gradient 6.5%, which is quite steep because it's not that long. And, well, there'll still be 138k to go when we get over the top. There we are then. There's the peloton over 3 minutes back, but they've got themselves reorganised. Now, don't forget the riders racing towards their first rest day tomorrow of this year's Tour de France. Well, tomorrow might be a rest day for the riders, but not for us here at OLN. If you missed any of the race action this week, then don't forget our 2005 Tour de France rest day show is on tomorrow. We'll recap all of the highlights of the opening 9 days of this tour, and that's tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, with us here on OLN. These are the two leaders setting the trail today. Rasmussen, very confident, only his second tour, but in his first tour last year, he did finish 14th overall. He never wore the leader's jersey in any category. This time, he's already got himself a lead in the King of the Mountains. There are chasers behind: Jens Voigt, Xavier Zandio, Alexander Moose, Angel Vicioso, Christophe Moreau and Inigo Landaluz. They're making hard work at getting up, but if those 6 riders do get up and we have a group of 8, then who knows which way we might be going then. Lovely crowds again in the Vosges, Paul, and the weather is beautiful. It's Sunday, of course, the second Sunday of the Tour de France. 2 more Sundays to go before we finally come to a halt in Paris. Skies are blue, but the weather forecasters are saying there might be thunder showers throughout the day. Could hit you anytime, anywhere. We don't really want it in the mountains.
You do not want rain in the mountains because it really makes the descents quite tortuous and dangerous. I think everybody very happy in the peloton this afternoon that finally the sun has started to come down. We've just caught a glimpse there of the leaders going around the corner. Armstrong still very much at the top end of the overall classification with a minute's advantage over Jens Voigt. and 1 minute and 2 seconds over Alexander Vinokourov. The other American, by the way, Bobby Julich, is still up there in 4th. I think today, though, Phil, we will have a little bit of a sorting out amongst the leaders, but only towards the end of the race when we get up to that first category climb, the Ballon d'Alsace, which I don't think will affect the overall standings too much, because as far as I'm concerned, it's much too far away from the finish.
Well, at the moment, Discovery are just putting down a little statement here, I think. All of Armstrong's team have come to the front to say, yes, the boys may have not finished with that group yesterday, but that doesn't mean they were tired. And they're controlling the peloton now, bringing it down to a more regular speed. We are on the climb of the Col de Bramont, 3rd mountain already today. What the riders did when they left Gérardmer was literally continue on the road they finished on. They just kept going, got back on the start line this morning, which was the finish line of yesterday, and then rode down the valley and hit the first hill straight away. Boy, it caught a lot of men out of position. This rider now looking for his 3rd win of the day, Michael Rasmussen. I don't think Dario Cioni will challenge him for the points. There's no reason to. He's happy to be in the breakaway with him, and I think sooner or later they will start to slow down and hope that the 6 chasers get up to them to give them a group of 8.
Well, the man there with the polka dot jersey, let's not forget, as he goes over the top of the climb here to get himself maximum points, should be streaking by to get himself a few points in that competition.
Well, here we go, up the mountain and over the top. Rasmussen, 3 chances today, 3 maximum 4-pointers for him. That's a nice result. He is riding well in this King of the Mountains. No challenges so far. There's the big field down there as he makes the big horseshoe bend. Well, down in that pack, one man that started to lay down his colours yesterday was Alejandro Valverde. Let's have a Capital One view of this great athlete.
For a rider in only his 4th year as a professional, Alejandro Valverde's achievements and potential are a little scary. In the past 3 years, he's won 28 races. He's won in the sprints and he's won in the mountains. Not surprisingly, he's become Spain's hottest cycling property, with the expectation that one day he'll be Spain's next great Tour de France rider. But at the age of 25, he's still growing and trying, despite his abilities to develop slowly. Until March this year, he hadn't actually won a race outside of Spain or Portugal, and still he was a rider who was respected and feared. His sprint win in the final stage of Paris-Nice in France this March proved why this rider is a man you ignore at your peril. He's had success in short stage races and finished 4th in last year's Tour of Spain. And now July brings more challenges to the young Spaniard as he enters his very first Tour de France. It's the ultimate test for a cyclist, and unfairly or not, Valverde is expected to make his mark. Whether he has the training and experience to excel in the world's biggest bike race is the question on everyone's lips. But as we've all witnessed, he's an extremely fast learner.
That's our athlete profile there with Alejandro Valverde, brought to us by Capital One. El Conquistador is how they know him in the sport, and there he is there. He is a real shot here. First Tour de France for him, and I think we're going to see a lot of him now. He's made his first play yesterday. He's only 134 pounds, ideal, of course, for the climbs that are still to come. Won the stage of this year's Paris-Nice, finishes 4th in the past in the Tour of Spain, where he's also been a stage winner. This is the time for him to really mature this next couple of weeks of the Tour de France, and you think he doesn't know that? And it looks as though Alejandro Valverde is stalking the Discovery boys down there at the moment, as they just make the pace. Over the top has gone Rasmussen first. Dario Cioni is in 2nd place. Those two still clear. The peloton with Lance Armstrong there right near the front is at 4 minutes and 16 seconds just now. The chase not making any progress, Paul. They're not getting any closer to those 2 leaders, the 6 boys chasing.
They're not, and they're not panicking really, because if you look critically at the group of riders who are chasing, none of them are real threats for the overall victory of Lance Armstrong. Although, if Christophe Moreau could find the form that took him to 4th place in the overall classification a couple of years ago, he might be tipped as a possible outsider and a dark horse. But I don't really think that Armstrong is too worried about Voigt and Moreau.
Well, it looks as though little Unai Echevarria is having trouble following the pace today as well. It's caught a lot of riders on one leg. These first series of 3 hills, they really should have warmed up. Still getting all the points on top of the mountain. In fact, in second place, Dario Cioni. Murrow again scoring well third. That's 2 climbs he's done that in now over the top of the mountain. The man in the chase group, Jens Voigt, yes, he is second overall in the Tour de France, exactly 1 minute behind Lance. He's not a man we don't think can win the Tour, and Lance would probably agree with that, but he's gone out front to try and be the next wearer of the maillot jaune.
Yeah, I think they'll be very saddened by the fact that this morning poor old Dave Zabriskie, who's had a number of nasty accidents in the event, had to pull off at the side of the road and abandon. He finished 51 minutes behind yesterday. It's such a sad thing from a man who enjoyed the joy of being the first wearer of the yellow jersey to go out of the race like that, because the Tour, Phil, is unlike any other bike race in the world. None of these riders who participate want to abandon. It's like going to the summit of Mount Everest. You don't want to almost get there and then turn back.
No, that's absolutely right. Nobody likes to leave the Tour de France. As an athlete, of course, Paris is the goal. And one rider still chasing on his own ahead of the field is Bietzberg of the Gerolsteiner team. He's a Swiss rider. A bit more cry for help there coming this time from Stefan Schreck, I think it was, as they all start to look for trouble now at the back of the race. Everybody over the top now of the third climb of the day. Good cue for us to take a break, but before we go, here's a Subway trivia question for you, and when we come back, of course, we'll give you the answer. In case you don't know it, bike technology in the Tours come a long way since the race began over 100 years ago. Until 1937, what key piece of equipment were riders banned from using? Was it A, aerodynamic handlebars, B, sunglasses, C, rear derailleurs, or D, bike shorts? We'll give you the answer when we come back after the break. Pretty easy, that one, isn't it? Well, we'll find out. And welcome back. Well, today's Subway trivia question, I didn't think it was very hard, but here we are. Bike technology in the Tours come a long way since the race began over 100 years ago. Until 1937, what key piece of equipment were riders banned from using? A, aerodynamic, oh, everybody got that. Derailleur gears, of course. Can you imagine people riding with no bike shorts on? So D was definitely a no-no. Rear derailleur gears, yes, they weren't allowed in 1937, but they are now. And we're looking here at Dario Cioni now setting the pace along with Michael Rasmussen, 2 strong men, both in their second Tour de France ever. The last time Cioni rode, by the way, was 2 years ago in 2003. Rasmussen came in for the first time in 2004. They're still being chased by 6 riders who are getting no closer at all. And Bietzberg has gone back into the peloton, which is now sighted with Lance in it at 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Well, let's have a look at our Bank of American standings in the Tour de France, because sadly one has gone out today. David Zabriskie, he was still in at the start. Armstrong on top, Bobby Julich in 4th place, George Hincapie down to 8th, Floyd Landis in 10th, Leipheimer 14th. Chris Horner rode brilliantly yesterday in his first Tour, up to 45th now for Chris. Freddie Rodriguez, a sprinter, he's in 93rd. Zabriskie was in at the start, but I'm afraid I have to tell you now, dropped out about 10 kilometres into the day. That's our Bank of America standings as the race now heads to Le Grand Ballon. And what's going to happen on Le Grand Ballon, Paul? Because this is... you must have climbed over this climb, did you?
I've climbed over both of the climbs on today's stage. In fact, the Grand Ballon, and well, you know that I was never the greatest climber in the world, but the Grand Ballon is slightly easier. Although it climbs up to a higher altitude, it's much more of a false flat. It's a climb that goes up for around about 12 or 13 miles. And in fact, it kicks up just a little bit towards the top. It really is quite amazing to look at these 2 guys, because we're looking at a couple of guys who are both former mountain bikers. And of course, Michael Rasmussen was world champion.
He was indeed, but they've got great skill as mountain bikers. They've now converted that talent to road cycling, and here they are, 2 of them now leading on today's stage of the Tour de France, showing no signs of weakening. And in fact, Rasmussen will want the top of the Grand Ballon, because this is a second category climb, carries 10 points.
Big points for this man who's already building himself a massive advantage in that competition. He's trying to take over from the role of Richard Virenque, the man who won the King of the Mountains title 7 times in 10 years. He basically made that his own.
Well, that's the outstanding record. 2 riders in the past have won it 6 times. The Eagle of Toledo, Federico Bahamontes, and the little man from Belgium. They don't get many good climbers from Belgium, but Lucien Van Impe was exceptional.
Federico Barmontes was an incredible bike rider, and he says he doesn't want to take anything away from the performance of Richard Virenque getting himself that 7th title last year, but he said Virenque only ever looked at the title of King of the Mountains, whereas Barmontes himself taking the King of the Mountains title on the way to trying to win the Tour de France.
Well, here we are now. They're out of the saddle. They've just started the climb of Le Grand Ballon, but it'll be a while before they see the top, because it is a climb of 21.9 kilometres. 12 miles steadily uphill now for these riders, up into the dizzy heights of the beautiful area of the Haute Rhine. The High Rhine valleys is right below us there as we now climb up into the Vosges. This is a lovely part, and the clouds looking okay at the moment. So this is the polka dot jersey in the lead, easy to spot. Just to remind you all about the 4 major classifications of the Tour de France and who the leaders are today. This is brought to us by Lenovo, and Lance Armstrong, of course, in yellow for a 5th day running. Tom Bonan holds green, but struggling at the back in the mountains. Vladimir Karpich claimed the white jersey away from Jaroslav Popovic yesterday. He won it last year as well. And Rasmussen looking very solid just now in that polka dot jersey as the new leader after yesterday in the King of the Mountains competition. He's got 44 points now, which is 24 more than second placed Andreas Kloden. So that's not a bad score to start with, is it? They are our principal leaders. The chasers here are swinging left. That means they're now onto the slopes of the biggest climb of the day so far, which is Le Grand Ballon. The leaders are on the way up there. This mountain is a very, very long one, 22 kilometers virtually in length. Great battles to come on the mountain. Stay with us all the way. The riders have been in the saddle now for just over an hour of racing today. Jens Voigt here, still leading a charging group of 6 men, including Alexander Moos, Vicioso, Christophe Moreau. Still trying to get on terms with the 2 leaders up front, Michael Rasmussen and Dario Cioni. We're now looking at the very much the lower slopes of Le Grand Ballon as we now climb away again. The time gaps there, they are for you to see. 2:38 to the Jens Voigt group, 3:50 to Zeberg, and then the peloton there with Lance Armstrong in it. Just taking things easy, not too worried about the riders, the opportunists up the road. Although at the moment, Lance Armstrong again has lost his jersey to an attacker because Jens Voigt started the day just 1 minute back. He's more than recovered that now. These are nearly at 6 minutes now, the yellow jersey group. At some stage, we are going to see one big chase if they want to survive the day. And that's the show that changed television forever, wasn't it? Now, Survivor lives on OLN. See the first challenges, the first alliances, the first unforgettable season. Grab your torches, let's head back to camp. For the first time in 5 years, Survivor lives on OLN. It will premiere July the 24th at 7. Now, I'm not too sure what's going on here, but this is Bram tanking back at the doctor's car. At the front, it's Armstrong riding very sensibly here because of all the hills to come today. Remember, we're racing to the rest day, which is tomorrow. When the riders wake up on Tuesday morning, they'll be heading up the high climbs of the Alps. They don't want to overcook themselves today.
No panic for Discovery Channel after all, Phil. I mean, if you look at the members in that leading group, Jens Voigt is never going to stay with Armstrong on the high alpine passes or the passes over the Pyrenees. This man might, but I think Christophe Moreau is very much getting towards the autumn of his career. You know, he's almost 35 years of age. I think when it comes to the big passes, one day or another, he's going to lose himself a big chunk of time as well.
I have to say, though, Paul, he's looking better in this tour than he has in the past 2 or 3.
Certainly, he's a man who, we mustn't forget, finished in 4th place overall. He won the opening day's prologue. It has, despite the mountains, been a very fast opening 1 hour of racing. We've covered the first hour with those 3 mountain passes.
Can't believe it.
41.5 kilometers an hour.
That's enormously fast. We've been over 3 mountains already, and they're averaging 41 kilometers an hour. That was why a lot of riders were left behind, and why the American David Zabriskie thought enough was enough. He couldn't make it. There's still, this is again Echeverria, who's in trouble once more on the climb. And these riders are steadily being dropped by the pack on the lower slopes of Le Grand Ballon. We've also lost here Stefano Zanini. Probably less of a surprise. He's a big boy for these mountains. but there are others dancing around in trouble, and that's a Demeanor Vacanzi rider, Anthelo Fairland, the sprinter. But he's had a couple of bad crashes. He may be feeling the effects.
He went down very nastily a couple of days ago when we were in Germany at the finish in Karlsruhe. But the sprinters, Phil, will try and get themselves together. They'll try and form a group, which we call a gruppetto, and they'll just try and get themselves to the finish inside the elimination time.
That's right. So these are the riders with the team stamping out the message and lining up behind. We've got T-Mobile. Well, how about our Honda highlight of the day? There were lots of highlights yesterday, but this was the best one. It was the sprint finish, the newcomer on the left taking on one of the old veterans, Andreas Klöden. Who got it? Well, that was the closest finish in the history of the Tour de France. I think they're talking about it being 1/110,000th of a second between them. It is Peter Wienen who got his first ever victory. That was the Honda highlight of the day. As we look at a very tight peloton here, showing Noken, somebody's taking a little bit of cyclo-cross there, riding on the grass. Can't get back into the bunch now. It's a Fassa Bortolo rider, and in fact he's continuing to ride on the grass and gain ground in the peloton. It's a tight fit on these narrow roads now, isn't it? The gaps are still there. The peloton losing steady ground here with Armstrong at the front. 6.5 minutes now, the gap, but that is to the two riders up front. And even this pace is hurting riders at the back of the field as they continue to drop off. Stay with us on Le Grand Ballon. And back in the mountains of the Tour de France today as the riders race towards their first rest day tomorrow on the road to Mulhouse. 171 kilometres, just over 100 miles. And it's nothing but climbing today until they get down towards the end. These two riders have been sensational. Breaking away in a couple of kilometres after the start. We've got the polka dot jersey there in the lead of Michael Rasmussen. But Lance Armstrong and his yellow jersey there indicating he's safely in the pack. That bunch is losing ground now. The chase contains 6 riders at 2 minutes 49 seconds. The one rider is Bietzberg at 2 minutes 47. And then comes the Lance Armstrong at 7:01. And the 4:05 there, I think, is Zberg. So there's another group got off in between, which our cameras aren't picking up anymore. We've run out of cameras already today. This is going to be an extraordinarily good race, though. There's no doubt about that. We're looking at Xavier Zandio, who's a teammate of Alessandro Valverde, over on the far right. CSC, of course, have got Jens Voigt up front, and currently he is the race leader on the road. But what about his teammate Bobby Julich? Here he is with Frankie Andreu at the start.
Bobby, first mountain day was yesterday. A lot happened on that final Category 2 climb. Tell me a little bit about your positioning in that climb and how you're feeling going up it.
I don't really think it was the first mountain day. I think that was just what we saw yesterday. The carnage that we saw yesterday on that last climb was kind of payback for the first week that we've been riding at 45K an hour average the whole tour. We can't ride like that and then expect to be strong on the final climb, and I think that a lot of teams and a lot of guys paid the price. But it wasn't such a hard climb. It was actually a big ring climb. We were going up it so fast. So I think today will give us a little bit better of an idea of the real talent and the real level that everyone's at.
Well, thank you for that, Bobby. So today, then, is the real test. He's absolutely right what he said, and that's what we suspected. The change of tempo and the slopes of the Col de la Schlucht really hurt some riders yesterday. They'll settle down a bit today, I think. Just looking down from the helicopter, all of Lance Armstrong's teammates are just keeping this chase at a sensible chase. They're losing ground steadily to the groups up front. But they're not going to be overweighed at this stage. On our heart monitor computers today, we've got him on Stuart O'Grady. He's beating out at 150 beats per minute as they ride only at 10.5 kilometres an hour just now. Cedric Vasseur, very relaxed, 138.
Stuart O'Grady yesterday actually wasn't too far away from getting over the top of the climb with that group. He was dropped at around about 5 kilometres to go, and he said to somebody I know just after the finish, he said, well, it was just going a little bit too fast uphill for me. I thought I was going to survive, and maybe today that's what he's trying to do. He's hoping possibly that there'll be a large group comes together into Mulhouse, and he, being the best of the climbers, the best climber out of all the sprinters, may well be a tip for the win.
Just looking at the sun here now, it's a beautiful warm summer's day, but the wind is strong and at times it's going to swing onto the riders' faces. This is the group of 6 making hard work of getting up to the leaders. They're at 2 minutes 57 of the duo, which is Matt Rasmussen and Joni, 2 riders in their second tour. Here's the new leader of the Tour de France on the road, but of course you've got to be the new leader when you get down to the finish, and so right now he won't be thinking of a yellow jersey just yet. It's a very good move, this, by Jens Voigt.
A great move. He doesn't care at all, does he, about tactics? He doesn't think about the distance to the finish. All he thinks about is getting it to the front, getting on the breakaway and dishing out as much pain as possible.
Chance to go up to the front. And Rasmussen, whenever we come to the front, seems to be doing all of the work here. He's got to be careful he doesn't allow his enthusiasm to run away with him in these first 2 days in the hills, because we've got some tough journeys through the Alps next week, and in the last week, horrendous journeys through the Pyrenees. If he throws all his energy to the wall now, he might be in trouble.
Well, I think the reason he's gone out today so hard is because he knows he's got a bit of recuperation tomorrow. We have got a transfer down to the Alps. We will go overnight to the city of Grenoble, where the riders will start the stage on Tuesday to go up to Courchevel. He probably thinks that it's not that much of a problem, because when we get to the high Alps, he won't do a move like this. He will just try and accompany over the top of the mountain passes there.
Well, very often, people who've won the King of the Mountains have always laid the foundation in these smaller hills before the high mountains, but the high mountains carry the big points, of course, for the polka dot jersey. 7-8 team are going back now to Armstrong's main field, so it's going to slip away for a while, and when and if will the chase happen? Voigt is hoping it won't, because if it doesn't, then Lance will have given his yellow jersey away to take it back, he hopes, in the Alps.
Tactically, the sensible thing to do right now is to give them a free rein, to allow them to build up their advantage on the slopes of this climb. Armstrong wants to keep as many teammates around him as possible. Then if he wants to close it down towards the end, the place to start the chase is after the Ballon d'Alsace.
That would make great sense indeed, Paul. Yeah, flat roads in. So, good tempo riding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th place. Well, let's have a look at the course today for us, which will be brought to us this time by AMD. These are the mountains today. This is the route. We've been over the first one, which was the Gros Pierre. Then we went over the Col des Fins, all won by Rasmussen, who's also taken the Col de Bramont. We're over that one. And the Ballon, we're still waiting for the summit of at 4,390 feet. There's the results for you. 3 third categories are behind us. The Grand Ballon is next. Then we've got the Col de Buisson. And then we come over the Ballon d'Alsace, the big giant of the day, at 3,800 feet. Not quite as high as the Grand Ballon, but it's much steeper. These boys know that too, as they continue to course here on the road around the Black Forest. Just hearing the people shouting at the 2 leaders here and cheering them on. They love to see good escapes. Dario Cioni looking pretty cool and relaxed at the minute. Both of these riders, former mountain bike riders at the highest level. Rasmussen was a world cross-country champion on mountain biking. And now he's going across country on a road bike, and he's leading the Tour de France.
Cioni's a great bike rider too there in the lime green jersey of the Liquigas team. He's a man who finished 4th overall in the Giro last year, and he actually was not even tipped by the team as an overall classification rider. He was supposedly brought into the team just to look after the lead-out sprints for Alessandro Patacchi. That pressure being set on the front, though, by Team Discovery Channel, Phil, I think is starting to become just a little bit uncomfortable for a lot of riders in the group, because it's stretching out a lot. Bit of excitement on the finish line.
You can probably hear the band coming through, all in fancy dress and riding bikes, of course, managing to play drums at the same time. There's the peloton. It doesn't look as though it's going quite as slowly as it was just now. They're stretching them out into a long line here. We're still on the Grand Ballon, but it is a steady climb, this. They'll keep a high tempo, a bit like the Col de la Schlucht yesterday. Few gaps poised, but you see, after we've got all of the front runners are Discovery, the whole team is in that straight line. Then comes Jan Ullrich's boys just behind in the mauve jerseys. Quite amazing. We'll take another break. Stay with us for the Grand Ballon summit.
What more can he possibly do?
He's recovered from advanced cancer to capture his first yellow jersey.
This is a tale of determination and suffering.
That's jersey number 2.
He took a look straight into the eyes and blew the competition away.
The Armstrong Express is just wiping them all out.
Somehow Lance has avoided disaster to become a 5-time winner.
He shattered the record, the only man with 6.
The cyclism returns to OLN. 8:30 a.m. live, 8 p.m. expanded coverage.
Welcome back to the slopes of the Grand Ballon. It is going on a bit, isn't it, as we continue to climb up towards the summit. Same 2 riders not only holding their own but increasing the lead now. It's getting on towards 8 minutes. 7:41 back to Lance Armstrong. Captured now is Bietzerberg, so there is only 6 riders altogether chasing the 2 front runners. Axel Merckx is chasing everybody. He's just done a bicycle change at the back of the field. Good change though, and have no problems getting back up to the leaders, which is always good news. This is the breakaway in the chase groups at the moment as they try to make the most of it, but they're not making much inroads. Merckx just coming onto the back of the group with a superb change here. They're riding very sensibly, I think, and there is the head of the bunch now with Lance Armstrong safely in it. Good chance to join Craig Hummer, who chatted to Lance at the start today.
Without making too much out of it, was it a good wake-up call perhaps for everybody?
Oh, I think so. I think we started in an ideal situation with the opening time trial and the team time trial and having been up front the first week. But that's not reality. You know, the reality is that it's 3 weeks and you have to be good the whole time. And perhaps yesterday caught us all by surprise. We clearly didn't know the stage, which might have been a mistake. But we have to move on from here and try to make it better.
Well, one day before the rest day, and in your mind, is it important to seize the momentum back or at least show the other teams today that you are still in control as a team?
We have to see. We're not going to... It's probably better that we let the race go a little bit today tactically, and we don't need to keep the yellow jersey tonight. We don't need to keep it through the Alps, and as we've said too many times, we need to have it at the end. And so... we'll see how the race unfolds. I suspect they're going to go from kilometer 0, and of course we have a lot of climbs in the beginning, and we'll just see what happens on the road. You know, the first priority is that the guys feel better and get their confidence back, and the only way to do that is to ride at the front.
All right, have a good day.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Lance. Well, how uncanny is that? Everything Lance said there, I think, has happened in the first hour of the race today. The race has gone in the first kilometre. They have got confidence back by riding at the front, and they may be giving the yellow jersey away to Jens Voigt, who currently is in that chase group of 6. 7:42 the gap, so I think the answer's clear now. There's not going to be a chase from Lance Armstrong and his boys. Jens might be the next race leader when we resume after Tuesday. Meanwhile, the cheers are for the 2 men who are blazing this trail here over the mountains, which first came into the Tour de France 100 years ago. And Michael Rasmussen, one of the young men in the race, in his second tour now, is the leader in the King of the Mountain, and he's building on it.
He's certainly building on it. I think he was very sensible just a few moments ago, because he actually sat up and waited for Dario Cioni, because there's still, Phil, a very long way to go to the finish. No panning at all either with Team Discovery Channel, although they are giving around about 4.5 minutes to Jens Voigt and Christophe Moreau.
They're just not getting up, are they? They're going back.
Well, they're not too worried, I don't think. I think they will pick up the chasing, and we're just getting information here that poor old sprinter from Crédit Agricole, Jan Kirsipuu, has just abandoned. Now, that's a bit of a surprise. Well, I suppose it isn't really,
no,
Phil,
it's
because
not.
he's never finished the Tour.
No disrespect at all to Jan, but you're right. He's never finished the Tour de France at all, and it looks like this time around will be no exception, because he's now got 12 Tours de France under his belt, and he's not yet found the road to Paris.
12 abandons. But at least he was a big help to Thor Hushovd in the early stages, despite the fact that they seem to be setting just an easy tempo on the front, Phil. That main field is certainly now starting to stretch out into a very long line. There'll be 1 or 2 riders in there throwing out the sandbags and asking for a bit of mercy, I would think, and hoping that at least at some time or another Team Discovery Channel are going to turn off the pressure for just a fraction.
A little trivia for you, Paul. It's the 4th time that Jan Kirsipuu was abandoned on stage 9.
Well, it just goes to show he enjoys the first week, but once we get into the 10th day, maybe he's got that allergy coming back. The allergy which rears up
Mountain
to around
fever.
about 2,000 meters.
Mountain fever, you're right. Well, Kirsipu's a big winner as a bike rider, but he just can't get round the hills of the Tour de France. Meanwhile, these boys are doing what Lance Armstrong said they would do today, ride at the front and get themselves some confidence. He expected attacks from the go, and he's quite happy to give the jersey away today and look to take it back on another day. So Jens Voigt might have made the move that will take him to his first ever maillot jaune.
That might be the move for Jens Voigt. I can't see Armstrong chasing down and burning out his team on a stage like this, because he knows after the rest day we're looking at 3 very difficult days in the Alps. Most of the other contenders feel that in fact there are only 2 hard days, but Armstrong has actually looked at the 3rd day in the Alps, and he reckons that is a real leg breaker.
Well, look at this. Angel Vicioso is having his leg breaker right here on Le Grand Ballon, because he's having trouble holding on to these 6 just now. They'll need him a bit later on if they could get into the flatter roads, but here he's in trouble, and I think this might be a cracking time for him. Zandio, Moose, Vicioso, Moreau, Landeluz, Voigt is the breakaway group that's chasing the 2 leaders. He's got to hang on for a little bit longer yet, because this is a long climb at Le Grand Ballon.
It's a very long climb. In fact, they've got around about 4 or 5 kilometers to go to the summit, because unfortunately for Vicioso, he's lost the back end of the bus here. I'm sorry about the little picture breakup that we're getting, but they are live pictures. It's because we're moving along with this show on the open roads of France, rejoining the 2 leaders who have got a massive advantage over the peloton. 7 minutes and 40 seconds currently. The second chase is pulling back a fraction on the 2 leaders, down to 2 minutes and 43 seconds.
Well, these are the 2 leaders. I think earlier I might have mentioned that Jens Voigt had only ever worn the King of the Mountains jersey. I've just checked my records. In fact, he wore the yellow jersey for a day back in 2001. He also, that was the year he won the stage into Salon when he beat Bradley McGee of Australia.
It was an unbelievable day. He almost dragged Bradley McGee along on that occasion, and the reason he was dragging him along was because he'd actually participated in the success of the breakaway. McGee crossed the finishing line on that occasion and collapsed. Jens amazes me, Phil, by the fact that being such a big, bulky, strong rider, you wouldn't expect him to be so good in the mountains, but he was showing there that he's got a pretty efficient pedaling style.
Well, it's a day for celebration and enjoyment here in the lovely area of the Vosges and the Black Forest. Here's our little green board man saying that Lance and his bunch are at 7 minutes and 50 seconds now, while Jens Voigt and his group are 3 minutes further back. Which is good, because it means that Voigt is still the top man, likely to be the next candidate for the maillot jaune. All right, well, they won't be thinking of lunch today, but why not? We can. OLN's looking for the king of the queue in their hot new series, the All-Star Barbecue Showdown. This will premiere July 23rd. OLN will pit 8 of America's finest barbecue masters up against amateur homegrown grillers to find the All-Star Barbecue Champion. As the All-Star Barbecue Champion, catch a sneak preview July 23, immediately following live coverage of the Tour de France here on OLN. 5 kilometers still to go. I think we've been on this climb now for well over half an hour as they continue to ride fairly high tempo using reasonably heavy gears on the big chain wheel, Dario Cioni. But the man anxious to scurry over the top first is still Michael Rasmussen, doing the lion's share of the pacemaking here. Very, very good pacemaking, because he's still pulling away. Chase at 2:31, which is really not making a lot of progress. He'll need those boys chasing sooner or later, I'm sure of that. Here they are. Vicioso has got himself hooked up to the back again. Lance Armstrong's bunch is at 7 minutes and 50 seconds. Well, we know exactly where we are now. There's Lance Armstrong and his group, about 4.5 kilometers to climb. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll be atop the Grand Ballon. Join us very shortly. A great day in France. Back, and we're still on the slopes of Le Grand Ballon. We're heading up now to 64 kilometers covered, 107 still to race. This extended coverage today here on OLN of the Tour de France. Enjoy it with us. It's a beautiful day for bike racing. Lance Armstrong sitting in the armchair with his 8 teammates in front of him, nearly 8 minutes plus now behind the race leaders. But the one man who might be the next leader is up the road, Jens Voigt. Not too far now, about 3 kilometres, maybe 2.5 before the riders get over the summit. Every time we come back to the leaders, Paul, it is Rasmussen doing the pacemaking. I'm not sure Cioni's helping him at all.
Well, I think Cioni's suffering a fraction on the climbs. In fact, on a number of occasions, Rasmussen has lifted up or slackened off the pace a little bit to allow Dario Cioni to stay in contact with him, because he knows there's a very long ride from the summit of the Grand Ballon to the Ballon d'Alsace. It's a long valley road, and he needs, I think, an ally to make sure that he can take a fair amount of his advantage, which is currently hovering at around about the 2.5 minute mark over the 6 chasers, but a massive 8 minutes over the main field.
1.5 kilometres to go now before we get atop the Grand Ballon, and then we do the descent, as Paul has said. We go through one of these green jersey bonus sprints, then a small third category climb will be the footsteps onto Le Grand Ballon, the Ballon d'Alsace, pardon, and then a couple of hotspot sprints on the way down back to Mulhouse. That's the route for the day. 7:49 is the latest news now. Stuart O'Grady's heartbeat is at 138. He's calmed down. He's doing 50 kilometres an hour currently in this bunch, while Vasseur's heartbeat, that's Cedric, he does stay very cool at 130 beats per minute.
He does. He's, I think, enjoying the stage here this afternoon. It'll be interesting to see whether Stuart O'Grady can get himself over the Ballon d'Alsace, because if he can, he's got a very good chance of taking out the victory. But Thor Hushovd is also still in contact with this group. Look at this. You can see there's almost a psychological game going on here, Phil. You've got 9 riders in the first 9 places, are all in the same jersey, the Discovery Channel jersey of Lance Armstrong's teammates, and right behind them, all of the pink jerseys of T-Mobile.
Well, this crowd here is enormous. I think they may have chosen this climb because once the Tour de France has gone by, they can actually get on the road, which will be reopened pretty quickly, descend and turn left and go into Mulhouse and watch the riders finish, because the riders go off on a grand tour to locate the Ballon d'Alsace. 1 kilometre now to the summit. Rasmussen has been winning over the top of everyone, and I don't think Dario Cioni will ever go past him now when the points are at stake, because that would not be very fair, would it? 2:36 is the gap now to the chasers, 7:49 to the Lance Armstrong peloton.
Cioni won't challenge him at the top, because in fact Rasmussen has waited for Cioni on a couple of occasions, so if he were to do that, I don't think Michael Rasmussen would be all that happy. Still hovering at inside of 8 minutes back to the main field, which is currently being led by Armstrong's men, and this group here is still sort of locked in at the 2.5 minute mark. Interesting to note that the rider there, Phil, from Ile Baleares, just there wearing number 39.
Never heard of him. Who is he?
He's from Pamplona, actually, which is the area not too far away from where Miguel Indurain comes from. He's been a professional since 2000, never won a race in his career, and he's always ridden for the same team, and he's finding himself here in a very serious breakaway situation at the Tour.
Well, he's been on the team when Miguel Indurain was around, hasn't he? But he never made the Tour with him.
He never made the Tour de France at all, and he's a rider who I think today will be rising high up in the overall classification. The 2 leaders, by the way, started the day a long way down. Michael Rasmussen, in fact, is over 7.5 minutes behind Lance Armstrong in the overall classification, but he did finish in 14th place overall last year.
Yes, he did, and that was his first Tour. But this year, he set his sights on the King of the Mountains. He's got his target, and he's done the first thing. He's got the race lead, but of course the big mountain's still ahead, starting Tuesday. There's the board being shown to the riders. What will they see is what we already know. 2.5 minutes to the chase of 6, nearly 8 minutes to this group, and they've got a lot of work to do to close the gap. Once we get over the Grand Ballon, we will have a nice long descent down to the main highway number 66, where we will turn right, and we'll be heading up then towards the Ballon d'Alsace. There's the whole peloton in the Tour de France. I tell you, in the first half hour today, many of those riders must have wondered what on earth was going on. The attacks were so strong, the peloton almost disintegrated into groups of 5 and 6. They've reorganized themselves now. Look at this crowd here. Well, this is the central part of the Vosges Mountains in the Black Forest. And here comes Michael Rasmussen, knowing what it feels like now to be a leader on a top mountain pass.
I tell you what, it's not a question of look at the crowd, it's listen to the crowd, because they're going absolutely ballistic here, encouraging these riders. They've come into the Vosges. We don't very often come into the Vosges Mountains, but I tell you what, they are hard climbs that these riders are facing here this afternoon. Just around the corner here, Rasmussen will set himself up for maximum points once again. He's doing this very much, Phil, in the style of one Richard Viron, building up an early lead in the King of the Mountains classification. Acceleration there, he just wanted to make sure that there would be no challenge from Dario Cioni, and over the top, I think he's going to wait for him.
Nothing from Cioni. He signalled he wants a drink from his team. Now he's getting on the radio just to ask them. Here it comes. They can give him a drink now that the climb is over. Now they can prepare for the descent. A wonderful crowd. We saw the American flags, German flags, Spanish flags up there. This is a fully international bike race these days, unlike any of the other national tours, I think.
Just a technical point there. You saw very quickly after the summit of the climb, Cioni taking on board a bottle. Well, in the race, although you're allowed to take on board drinks from the 50th kilometre till 20 kilometres to go, you're not actually allowed to take a bottle on board in the ascent of a climb, because there's too much ability for somebody to cheat and hold on to a bottle. So as soon as he crossed the finishing point at the top of the climb, the first thing he did was took on board a drink.
So no fine for him today then. Quite a legal manoeuvre that. Here's the chase, 2:36 the gap at the minute. And the rider in the orange jersey is Inigo Landaluz, number 197, a winner, and the only race he's ever won in his life was the Dauphiné Libéré, and he deserved it. He really had to race on the last day, and it was Armstrong's team who was putting him in difficulty, because it was a 1-2-3 on that final day for Lance Armstrong third, Popovic second, and the stage taken out by George Hincapie.
Christophe Moreau, the man setting the majority of the tempo. It was great to see Inigo Landaluz at the Dauphiné. What a brave performance it was on the final day of racing. He held on by just 11 seconds to the attack of Santiago Botero to take the win in what ended up being a great preparation for the Tour de France for the Euskaltel-Euskadi team.
Christophe Moreau third over the last two climbs, just kicked in there. He's looking if he can find the line, that is, to this crowd. He looks as though he's going to take third again. It's still a little ride to go over the summit, and the clock running with the passage over the top of Michael Rasmussen. Now there's no more hills now for quite a way, and I suspect that Rasmussen may just ease back now and allow this group to come up and join him, because you need a few more bodies now to set the pace as we drop into the valley for a while. Then the last two climbs of the day, including, of course, the big one itself, Le Ballon d'Alsace, which we will top with 56k to go. And it looks as though Christophe Moreau continues to play number 3 in the King of the Mountains.
He certainly does. He finished high up in the overall classification last year in the King of the Mountains classification. I think he was 4th, so he today will also be looking to keep himself as a challenger, because he's got a very good chance of accompanying the big groups as we go over the big alpine passes next week.
Well, Christophe, I think, has found some of the good old form he once had for the Tour de France when they were talking about him as a possible winner, and every time they did that, he let the side down and usually abandoned. He's worn the yellow jersey. He's even won the prologue time trial in Dunkirk a few years ago.
He certainly did. He beat Jan Ullrich and Lance Armstrong on that occasion, but later on in that same tour, he actually abandoned on the slopes of the Pyrenees and stopped at the side of the road. I think he was lying in 4th place overall at the time, but he had absolutely no power left in his legs.
Well, that's a nice picture. This is the peloton still on the way up, of course. They've still got a little way to ride. They're running it just on 8 minutes behind at the moment. Christophe Moreau, this year, by the way, is riding his 10th Tour de France. This is the Discovery Channel team leading Lance Armstrong around France for the last time. Remember, he will retire, win or lose, on July the 24th. And he's been such a character in the race over these last years. We shall miss him, there's no doubt about that. So these are now the dizzy descents now as the riders start their way down. As they'll go very fast down here now. This is the chase group as they start their way down. Let's remind you again, it is a rest day tomorrow. The riders don't need reminding, but don't forget we will have a show for you here on OLN. And if you've missed any of the action during this great week of cycling, then we will re-show it to you tomorrow. We'll recap all of the highlights of the first 9 days of the Tour de France. Timings 8 p.m. Eastern and Pacific tomorrow, and that of course only on this network. And while we're talking about what's on, the ride of a lifetime will continue our OLN's exclusive coverage of this year's Tour de France. It will continue with stage 10 after our rest day tomorrow. That'll be live Tuesday morning, 8:30 Eastern. We are in the high mountains of the Alps, everybody, and we'll bring you expanded prime-time coverage at 8 Eastern and 9 Pacific. We've got some great Tour de France coverage now over the next week, as every day will be D-Day for these riders. Right now, though, they're running themselves down the mountain, very gently towards the valley now, and a flat road towards the next big climb. 8 minutes and 1 second. The chase is just about getting on terms. There's still a lot of work to do at 2:26. I think now, Paul, though, that Michael Rasmussen and Dario Cioni will not really stay at 100% just for the next few kilometres.
I think they'll try and recuperate here on the descent and along the valley road, because they must know in the back of their minds that the next climb, which is rearing up, is a very difficult climb. The Ballon d'Alsace is a first category climb, the first category climb we've had at the Tour de France this year, and they know it's going to be very difficult. And I'm sure in the back of Dario Cioni's mind, he's a little bit worried about that, because Rasmussen is climbing so much better than he is.
Here we are. Well, the leaders are going down, the chasers are going up. They've not made the top yet. The clock is still running. Steady tempo riding. There hasn't been any change of formation at the front of this all day, which means that Lance Armstrong's rivals are still working out what to do with today's racing. Baden Cook
and Maggie Backstead.
Oh dear.
Not enjoying this.
Baden want?
Baden wants a drink as quickly as possible. Maggie will probably use his 95 kilos to advantage going down this descent to try and reintegrate the front end of the main field. But you know, when you're as big as Maggie, these climbs are not a lot of fun.
No, but he's only just off the tail of the field here, so he can get back on the descent. He just wants the limits. He doesn't want to drop too far behind. There's a bit of a carnage at the back here. Riders losing ground all the time. Baden Cook has just gone. Another one of his teammates coming back for him here, and this looks like Bernard Eisel, the other sprinter. And you don't need luck like that, do you, when you're in difficulty on the climb? That's a flat tyre on the right.
Yes, that's pretty difficult for that man from Domino Vacanti. He's going to have to make a serious chase to try and reintegrate the front end of the main field. Robert Forster going off the back too.
The sprinters don't like the hills, but they have to survive these hills, and it hurts them, because if they don't, of course, they're out of the Tour for when it gets back to their specially designed stages.
It's a pity these riders are suffering as they are on their bikes here, because not too far away from the summit of this climb, there's a very famous monument to the Blue Devils. Those were the Alpine troops of the French during the First World War. That monument was demolished during the Second World War by the Germans, and then later on it was put back to its original splendor, but it took about 20 years before they had the time to do that. A big heart of the resistance, this area of France as well. The resistance very much centered in the Vosges region during the occupation of France during the 39-45 Second World War.
Because of the location strategically, it is right in the corner between Switzerland and Germany. Well, the leader's coming up. It'll just be over 8 minutes, I suspect, which is a big gap, but quite a manageable gap. It still gives Jens Voigt the yellow jersey on the road. About 7:50 was the gap over the summit.
Tactically, that would be actually a brilliant move, to move the yellow jersey away from Lance Armstrong for a couple of J's and give it to Team CSC, because they know CSC would do everything to keep the yellow jersey.
Absolutely. There we are now at the highest point of the course today, but we still have the steepest climb to come. The peloton at the back here is still going over the top. 171 there is Bradley McGee. Doesn't want to sit around there too much. Well, there's still more climbs to come, of course, and there's a long way to go, so stay with us here on the road of the Tour de France. See you in a moment. We're looking at the wheels now of the riders in the chase group. This is, in fact, the rider at the back of the group, Angelo Vicioso. He's got back. Zandio, Moose, Morrow, Landeluz and Voigt are the other riders up here. Voigt with the most to explain, most to gain, because he's ahead of the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong now by just on 8 minutes, and that means he's the race leader on the road. There he is, and he could be in yellow by the end of the day, and I don't think Lance will be too unhappy about losing that pressure just on the eve of the rest day. But they've still got to catch up with the two men out front, Rasmussen and Dario Cioni. They're sort of getting on terms at 2:27. I wouldn't say the two front runners are waiting for them. They are making this rapid descent, but they're not really closing down the gap. Here's a tight one.
Nice move by Christophe Moreau, just leading them around and not losing too much impetus. You have to make sure going into these corners that you've actually got your bike into exactly the right gear, because you do slow down from 70 or 80 kilometers an hour to 40 kilometers an hour. Then you have to accelerate back up to top speed again. So that's why it's important coming into the corner very quickly to drop it down a couple of sprockets into maybe the 14 or 15 tooth sprocket.
Looks as though another Credit Agricole rider sitting at the back of the peloton here, and we've got Christophe Moreau driving at the front.
Still Thor Hushovd, and he's still in contact with the group. I think he's keeping his fingers crossed. I haven't seen Tom Boonen anywhere here this afternoon. I wonder whether or not Tom Boonen has been dropped.
Usually see cobblestones coming down this mountain, but they're on them right now. You're right, we haven't seen the green jersey, but they are indicating he is in this group, so he might be recovering from that rather sore back he collected when he crashed a couple of days ago. Meanwhile, at the sharp end of the peloton now, still the same boys from Discovery.
Still the same two men on Discovery. They seem to have returned to the tactics that they've had over the last 6 years of racing. Two guys on the front doing the majority of the pacemaking. Pavel Podrinos from the Czech Republic and Benjamin Noval sharing turns, setting a blistering pace, which is really making one or two of the climbers not enjoy themselves here this afternoon. It's not that difficult in the main field if you can get on the wheel of a rider in front of you, because Patrice Algon has currently got a heart rate which is hovering at around about the 126 beats a minute, and that's off a maximum that he can attain of 171.
So that's not too bad. But they're on the way down, don't forget, and it looks as though Hushovd there is not a very good descender. He's sitting right off the back of the group, so he can make sure he can see the approach to the corners. Looks a little bit nervous today, Thor. This is the race being led down the centre of the road. We're descending now Le Grand Ballon. Once into the valley, we'll get into Husseré-Wesseling, and then we'll join the main road, turning right away from Mulhouse.
Bit of a shame, isn't it? Because if they did turn left at the bottom, it's only about 35 kilometers to Mulhouse. Unfortunately, they're going to take a right-hand turn and go over the Ballon d'Alsace, and from the summit of the Ballon d'Alsace, it's still almost 50 kilometers to go.
And we're getting down the bottom now. This is Villers-sur-Thur, or Thur. These are the two leaders, and it's good to see now, once over the mountain, Dario Cioni back into his own here, willing to do a lot of work. It's a massive crowd, and we swing right here instead of left. The riders now setting course for the Col de Bousson, and then on to the Ballon d'Alsace.
Cioni there, I think, just suffering a fraction. They got a nice long ride along the flat here, but unfortunately it's not flat until the bottom of the Ballon d'Alsace, because there's another third category climb to go, and that third category climb, when they start to climb up, is the Col de Bousson. I'll tell you what, that'll break the legs.
It's a short one, and it's 73 kilometers to go when they go over the top of that one. We're moving quickly now too. Well, we're still on very much a record-breaking Tour de France with the speed of these riders. Our average speed so far 47 kilometers an hour since we left Noirmoutier, and we're getting that sort of speed again today. We'll take a break, come back and join us. We're back as we look at the riders here, still continuing their descent of Le Grand Ballon. The leaders and the chasers are off now onto the valley road, but they've been clocking speeds of up to 80 kilometers an hour down here today. This is the little picture of the tail, and Thor Hushovd swinging very, very wide off the back there. Still not a lot of change. 8 minutes 10 seconds back to Lance Armstrong, yellow jersey group, and 2:29 back to those six chasers who really are not making any progress in catching up with the tandem out front, which is a Danish-Italian tandem today, and they are now through the first sprint. We're just waiting for the result. It was no sprint, of course. They just continued to ride down the valley. 2:30 the gap here now. Well, as we see the riders coming down the mountain, you know, descending is a special one. Let's have a look at the Saab power descent. These boys running down the mountain. These are the leaders, knowing a perfect line of the corner there. These are mountain bikers. They've got great bike handling skills, the two leaders. Then watch Armstrong and the boys from Team Discovery as they also come charging out, leaning their bikes over at 45 degrees, descending here at 85 kilometers an hour. Well, that's a look at the Saar power descent. Meanwhile, at the front, Benjamin Noval and Pavel Padrinos, the pace setters of the day, regaining their courage and their confidence, I think. 8:12. They've lost just over 22 seconds on the leaders since they've topped the climb. So they're clearly not chasing, are they? And Jens Voigt in no man's land in between in that group of 6, but still the race leader on the road of today's stage of the Tour de France. This is now the middle of the feed zone here. Chance for Dario Cioni taking on his bag. All right, well, while he takes on his bag, let's go to the backstage pass and just join with Kirsten. This is our IBM backstage pass.
Each morning, it's a soigneur's job to pack the riders' lunches. Now, the amount and the ingredients that go into the musette bag can vary from team to team, but all the riders in the Tour de France are looking for bags filled with liquids, carbs, and calories. Gerolsteiner puts 8 items in each bag: 2 bars, 2 gels, 2 milk breads, and 2 bottles. A rider in the Tour de France uses an average of 5,000 calories per stage. The feed zone is the only time they will get solid food. And depending on the length of the stage, there may be more than one. Once riders get their bags, they put them on and then sort through them. And just like in grade school with your sack lunches, they'll take what they want, maybe trade with others, and then throw the rest out, making perfect souvenirs for fans.
And that's it, our IBM backstage pass. What do you think of the look on that little child's face there? He thought Christmas had just arrived with that free musette. I hope Kirsten left some food in there. Well, we're really moving on this mountain just at the moment, Paul. 2:23 the gap. Absolutely locked in at the same time gap, while the peloton are slowly sliding away. They're 25 seconds they've lost since topping the climb of the Grand Ballon.
I don't think that's so much of a worry. They do realize that I think they will try and just lock it in at that 8.5 minute mark, and it's more important the distance between themselves and of course Jens Voigt, because Jens Voigt is looking at becoming the new yellow jersey here at the race this afternoon. He's got the big chance here of putting the yellow jersey on his shoulders, and he may well keep it for a couple of mountain stages, but what it does is it shifts the responsibility away from Discovery Channel to CSC, and they will pull themselves inside out to keep Jens Voigt in the yellow jersey.
Well, here we are, Villers-sur-Ter for the main chase now. Some 8 minutes passed by since the leaders turned right onto the Route 66. Philippe Gilbert resting in the pack here. His heart rate currently reading 128 beats per minute, which is a very nice steady beat.
Nice steady beats. A lot of the riders riding reasonably comfortably in the main field. It won't be like that in a few moments' time, Phil, because we're going through fairly shortly the feeding station, and then the feeding station takes us through to the Col de Boussaint, and then we'll see heart rates going up to 170 or 180 as we approach the Ballon d'Alsace, which is the first category climb of this year's Tour de France.
Feeding station for the chase group now as they pass through the same point, some 2.5 minutes since the leaders went through. So the leaders must be very close now to the first time bonus sprint of the day. Not a great deal of interest for them. I don't think they'll sprint it out. Probably Cioni, who hasn't won any of the mountains, will be allowed to win the 800 euros for first prize in the town. Just taking no-handed here, and I don't recommend you do this. These guys are experts. This is Xavier Zandio sitting at the back, sorting out his food. While he does so, we're heading for the Col de Boussaint. That'll be the next challenge of the day as we get closer and closer. Stay with us. The climbs are coming back. This is the arrival in the feed now of the chase group, just about 2.25 to 2 minutes 20 behind the two leaders. And they've got a bit of work here, but at the sprint point, there was no race at all at the sprint point. In fact, as we suspected, Dario Cioni was on the front because he's been playing second fiddle on the mountains to Rasmussen. That's Rasmussen's main interest. Cioni goes through first there. Wins himself around about $1,000 for being first across the line. This is the peloton still losing ground, and the 6 chasers in between are not gaining any on the leaders, but they're still well clear of the bunch. And this is the sprint point, in fact, now, Paul. There's a third place sprint, but Jens Voigt, of course, taking a little bit of a bonus here because he gets 2 seconds, so he's now 58 seconds behind Lance Armstrong.
Every second counts, doesn't it, in a race like this, and it may well be an important second when it comes down to the end. You've got to take your hat off for Jens Voigt. He is a battler of a rider. He goes out on all occasions, and he's never afraid. What amazes me, Phil, is the man is in a high place in the overall classification, throws caution to the wind on the first climb of the day, and boom, there he is in the chasing group, trying to get himself the yellow jersey.
Well, Cioni wins the 6 seconds, of course, not really of interest to him. Rasmussen gets 4, but very important. Jens Voigt there taking 2. So now he's officially 58 seconds behind, but of course at the moment he's the leader of the race because he's a long way ahead of Armstrong. There's the peloton taking on food down below. Always a hazardous moment in the big pack.
Very hazardous.
Yeah.
I just caught a glimpse there of Andreas Kloden on the wrong side of the main field, just trying to whip round somebody to take his bag on board. You see how these boys from Discovery Channel are at the front end of the peloton. There was a little bit of a maneuver there. Somebody, you see, it's so dangerous here. There's the soigneurs or the helpers, they move into the middle of the road, reducing the side of the road, and the riders going round the back. Now, if you're a team helper at this point, you dare not move. You have to basically stand still and let the bike races go around. Someone's down.
Here. Well, this is sad to see this, but this looks like a rather bad fall here. Well, just making sure it's not, I hope it looks as though he may well have broken his collarbone. It's a Sony Duval rider.
I think that's Comesso up there as well who went down. You have to be so careful at this point.
It's not Chris Horn. I suppose that is in some way good news for the American viewers, but that is almost certainly a broken collarbone.
You've got to be so careful. You have to ride at the front at these moments when it's dangerous. You have to keep yourself out of danger because it is so chaotic in the feeding zone. Everybody wants to take on board their bag because they know in a race like this you've got to keep yourself topped up with food. That is Salvatore Comesso.
Yeah,
he looks in a bit of pain. He was on the attack yesterday. He's going to get up and ride again, and he's got to try and reintegrate the main field. And I wonder if they'll turn off the pressure a fraction to allow the riders who went down in that crash to reintegrate the main field.
That in itself wouldn't surprise me. But we're seeing now 2 riders have gone down. One, I think, is not going to resume in the Tour. He's taken rather a bad fall on his shoulder. And here he is here, Paul. I don't know whether you can recognise him. I don't recognise him. Is it Nicolas Fritsch, do you think?
It could be the French rider. I think it's in fact Gomez. It's Jose Angel Gomez who's gone down like that. And the way the doctor is looking at that, Phil, I think you could be right. That is probably a collarbone, which is the most common accident and injury that a professional bike rider can get. And the reason being is when you go down, you normally go down on your hands and the pressure goes straight up through the arm and just snaps the collarbone.
Well, he's obviously in great pain there, and the realisation is that he's out of the Tour de France. I was sure about that now, as the doctors will take him for examination. Poor old Salvatore Comesso here. Didn't even get his lunch, and he's now having to chase back into the main field as well.
Yeah, it brings a whole new meaning to fast food, doesn't it, when you have to pick up your food at around about 45 kilometres an hour, especially with the danger involved in the feeding zones at the Tour de France. Comesso actually looks as if he's recovered quite a bit. And you might have noticed that 1 or 2 of the team cars are quite helpful to a rider. If you have a mechanical incident or a crash like that, they will actually slowly go past you, giving you a bit of a chance to slipstream. And the referees will normally look the other way when a rider's committing what we call a professional foul.
As the main field goes on, we will get the name of that rider very shortly when he reports the ambulance. But the field themselves splitting on the big traffic island there and coming together at the top as they continue to race on. Comesso trying to get back on terms. Meanwhile, up at the front, unaware of what is happening, some 8 minutes down the road are the 2 leaders. They are now on the climb of the Col du Bousson. 73 kilometres to go once we're over the top.
Once we're over the top, they also have a slight descent of about 5 kilometres, and then they will start the big climb of the day, the Ballon d'Alsace, first category climb, the summit of which is at 56 kilometres to go, and Cioni's having a hard time here.
Well, I'm not surprised, and it looks as though he's not going to be able to match the rhythm now of Rasmussen, who's again eased up for him, which is interesting.
Interesting move by Rasmussen, quite prepared to stay with this rider for as long as possible. He does realise, Phil, that he's still looking at around about 80 kilometres to go to the finish, and he wants some support for as long as possible.
Yes, well, once we're over this little third category climb, I think you'll probably have to say goodbye to Dario Cioni on the climb of the Ballon d'Alsace, but let that come as may. Right now he needs him. The face here of Jens Voigt, the man who his next destiny could be the maillot jaune of the Tour as he drives this chase group on. Well, we've seen a lot of action already today, but the leaders have just started the climb now of the third category climb of the Col de Buisson. Still no news. Yes, they are saying that it was Jose Angel Gomez who crashed and has had to abandon the Tour. There is the crash. That is extremely sad for the Spanish rider. He's out of the Tour. We'll be back. Welcome back. We're looking here now at the Train Discovery Channel as they just limit their losses today, with the majority, if not all, of the race favourites safely in this pack. There could be a change of leadership, though. This is Salvatore Comesso. He's got back to the field after that crash, but he's now dropped back to the doctor to try and get some cream on that injured knee, just to stop the pain till they can get to sort it out at the end of the day. Poor old Salvatore Comesso, but it's nothing to what happened, of course, to Gomez, because he's out of the Tour. And up front, by the way, this has just happened too. We're on the climb of the Col de Buisson. Dario Cioni losing contact with the leader, Michael Rasmussen. In fact, Rasmussen wanted him to stay. He tried to slow down for him, but he simply can't match his pace. So there's the main field. One leader, one chaser, 6 after that, then the main field chasing. And there's still the Ballon d'Alsace to come. Peloton now back to 8 minutes and 38 seconds. So they've lost almost a minute since they topped the Grand Ballon. But the amazing thing is that, try as they might, the 6 chasers are still locked in at the same time gap, virtually within 2 or 3 seconds either way of Michael Rasmussen. Never shown any signs of closing it down.
It all depends very much, I think, how these riders in the main field decide to tackle the Ballon d'Alsace. I don't think Lance Armstrong and his men are too worried about trying to blow the race apart on the Ballon d'Alsace. But if there are any attacks and are any challenges, well, they will have to respond to them.
Oh, absolutely. They've got to go after them, and that's for sure. But I don't think Lance, as you say, Paul, he will initiate anything today. He wants a nice soft ride to the finish. But then again, the boys who attacked him yesterday might want to see how good he's going today. He's the leader on his own.
Yeah, but today it's tactically a little bit different. Yesterday the climb was so close to the finish, just 15 kilometers from the summit of the final climb of the day down to the finish line. Today, even if you do get an advantage at the summit of the Ballon d'Alsace, there is a long ride down to the finishing line here in Mulhouse. Time enough for anybody to get themselves organized and nullify the attacks.
Well, certainly discovering a new star of the Tour this year in the absence of Richard Virenque, the great climber. We've got a new one here in Rasmussen. The average speed today, 2 hours completed, 40.5 kilometers. That's 25 miles an hour. I find that quite amazing for this course.
Well, it's an amazing average speed when you bear in mind this has not been a flat course. It hasn't been a mainly predominant tailwind. So look at that. That's Robbie McEwen. He must be wondering whether or not he's going to get over the Ballon d'Alsace. He said he was going to be on holiday for the next week of racing.
Holiday.
But this is a pretty nice holiday, having a look at the back wheel of Lance Armstrong.
Absolutely amazing. McEwen openly admits he hates the hills, yet here he is riding on the back wheel of Lance Armstrong at this stage of the race, with all of the hills except 2 behind him now. That's very, very interesting. Paul, he can score green jersey points from this group today, which will move him a little bit closer to Thor Hushovd and, of course, the leader, Tom Bonen.
Yep, he's got to get over the Ballon d'Alsace, though, and that might be a bit of a disaster. Quick sign there of Lance Armstrong stretching himself. He's always worried about his back. He's always trying to stretch his back. Obviously feeling a little bit of pain there in the back. He is followed throughout the Tour de France by a chiropractor who makes sure that he's kept nice and in alignment every night.
Over into the town of Erbe just now, and the peloton enjoying their day in the Vosges because they're not really under pressure here. It might change when we get on to the Ballon d'Alsace, Here's the man who's piercing the air first, and this is Michael Rasmussen, and he's having a wonderful day today, looking for his next King of the Mountains points. Col de Buisson is where we are. Let's have a look at some statistics for you, brought to us by AMD. This is the details of the climb of the Col. 4.5% gradient, nothing great in itself. and it's 6.2 kilometers in length. Well, that makes it a bit harder. But of course, the big climb still sits ahead of this rider, and he's looking for that one to have a clean sweep of the mountains today. He'll certainly win this one. Just a chance to look at those new style handlebars. They're nicely squashed flat, a bit wide to grip, but seem to make a nice resting place for the elbows.
They certainly do, and he's trying to get himself in as aerodynamic a position as possible. These riders very shortly will see the lime green jersey of Dario Cioni, because he's been left behind by Michael Rasmussen. There's Big Jan, number 11, moving himself up to the tail of number 1 Lance Armstrong, and number 19 in the turquoise jersey with the yellow band across, the Kazakh national champion Alexander Vinokurov. Wasn't afraid at all yesterday to attack, was he?
No, I think there's, there are 2 leaders of this team now, 19 and number 11. They are down there. Oh, this is a problem at the back here, because this is Fabian Cancellara.
Cancellara had a mechanical incident there, but very quickly looked after by the team mechanic, very quickly back into the convoy of cars, and I would expect quite shortly he'll be back in the main field.
Well, Cancellara, the first winner of stage 1, which was the prologue time trial last year in the Tour de France. And just coming up alongside him there as well is Jose Luis Arrieta. He must have also had problems.
Yep, a lot of riders having a few problems, and I wonder how hard they're actually going to attack the Ballon d'Alsace, because if they don't ride it hard, then I have to agree with you. The sprinters may have a chance of catching up before the finish of the day. And Robin McEwen will certainly be looking to reintegrate himself at the top end of the green jersey race.
But it does seem that Jan Ullrich has decided to follow Captain Lance here today. He sat right behind him there. The men who finished first and second in the Tour de France on 3 occasions. Unfortunately for Jan, he's always been the second place rider. But he's going to have another go. He's always said no Tour de France is worth winning without Lance Armstrong. Well, Lance said before the Tour, well, this is his last chance, and there he is, licking his lips, sitting behind Armstrong and surrounded by the teammates, including Paolo Savidelli on Team Discovery. Meanwhile, on his own, not concerned with anybody's analysations of the Tour de France, Michael Rasmussen goes over the top of the Col de Buisson in the lead. Unfortunately, our picture there not behaving itself at all, but he's now won every climb except the last one, of course, still to come. What a day out. He's going to eat up the lead in the King of the Mountains. The peloton, I think, might find this climb getting a little bit tough, at the back. Life is no longer a pleasurable ride in the Tour de France. We'll just take a quick break. Rejoin us. We'll still be on this climb with the peloton. Well, we're looking at the riders in the Tour de France today, climbing towards the summit of the Col de Buisson, which puts them about 75 kilometers from the finish. Over the top has gone Michael Rasmussen, as we have seen. Second is Dario Cioni, and Lance Armstrong using Noval and Padronos again to keep the pace well here. And he's safely in the centre of his group. 3:21 to the chasers, and 9 minutes 15 now to Lance Armstrong's group. Well, he's making it quite apparent he's riding his own Tour de France today, and he doesn't really mind where anybody else is up the road. The lead, depending on the final time gaps, if they stay away, will pass either to Jens Voigt or indeed to Michael Rasmussen right now, who's leading by himself. Although one can't really expect him to lead, surely, from start to finish today. This is a little bit further down here. This is Thor Hushovd, and he has now finally been unhooked from that group. He hasn't been happy on the climbs. This time he's been left now. We don't know, although we are told that the green jersey of Tom Bonan is still in the bunch. Also, Robin McEwen is there. They are the men in our green jersey points competition. Let's have a look, though, over the race so far. If you're just tuning in or getting up, especially on the west coast of the United States at the start today, Lance Armstrong had a word with his team last night after they didn't finish with him. Straight away, there was attacks from the gun today, and then sadly came the first crash 4 kilometers down the road. Igor Gonzalez de Galdiano was out of the Tour in that crash. Then came the attack from Jens Voigt, a ripper it was, off the front of the bunch, looking perhaps for a yellow jersey, but ahead of him already on the road, Michael Rasmussen had gone away and was taking all of the climbs, one after another. One rider did reach him later on, Dario Cioni. But that crash to Igor Gonzalez de Galdeano, he did try to get back on his bike almost immediately. He was off it again. He is now out of the Tour de France. He simply couldn't make it. More trouble out on the highway on the descent of the second climb. A certain Jan Ulrich crashed on the descent. His team were told to stop. They're not allowed to ride against the race to go and look after him. They have to wait for him to come to them. He did come to them. Tobias Steinhauser there with him. There's the blood on his thigh, and they got him back into the race. But there was another sadness too, especially for the Americans, because the first American winner of stage 1, David Zabruski, who was behind by 51 minutes yesterday, hasn't recovered from his crash in the team time trial, dropped very early on at a rapid start out of the Tour de France today. On to the next climb. Rasmussen was ahead and gone. This is the chase for third place. Christophe Moreau is driving on the chase group. Discovery Channel got the race back together here and then took it by the scruff of the neck and started to just set the tempo, getting the team confidence after they took a knock yesterday. Meanwhile, on top of the Grand Ballon, where Dario Cioni was up there. No, this is the Col de Bramont. Dario Cioni sitting back while Rasmussen gets more King of the Mountains points. But Rasmussen waits. Then, as we got down to the sprint town, that's Hussein Vesseling. That was the Grand Ballon, by the way. We're now looking at Dario Cioni about the feeding station. Out goes one more rider in the shunt with Salvatore Camesso. This was a great shame, because this was Gomez Marcante, who has gone out of his first Tour de France, looking like a broken collarbone there. Meanwhile, on the climb of the Col de Buisson, taking us to 73 kilometres from the finish, Dario Cioni could not hold his friend anymore, and Michael Rasmussen left with no choice but to push on alone, and that's exactly what he's doing right now as he looks towards the lower slope shortly of the big one, the Ballon d'Alsace. So let's have a look at the current situation in the King of the Mountains. Remember, the last 8 of the 9 climbs in 2 days have all been won by Rasmussen. He's now got 58 points to Cloden's 20. Dario Cioni is on 18. So over 9 minutes now to Armstrong's group on Michael Rasmussen. Well, we're getting towards the big climb of the day. It's the last climb of the day. There's still 56 kilometres to go once we are over the top of the climb. And we still don't know how this day is going to pan out. We're very intrigued as to what might happen in the peloton on the climb. Thor Hushovd here trying to get a hand back in the race.
Well, it's quite interesting that Crédit Agricole have sent a couple of riders back from the main field to try and pace Thor Hushovd over this climb. I do think, though, that if he's dropped on this climb, he's going to have a very hard time on the Ballon d'Alsace. But that's what they're hoping, that he can get over the Ballon d'Alsace, catch back up with the main field, and then maybe get himself some points in the green jersey points race.
Well, it's the Sebastian's tandem there, Jolly and Eno, who have gone back for him and trying to get him back. So they've used 2 of their smaller riders on the team to try and give him some company, give him some encouragement, maybe bring him back into the peloton. There's been a nice steady tempo there by Armstrong's team. This is the rider who is breaking away, and I think by now, Paul, he might be getting himself onto the lower slopes of the Ballon d'Alsace.
You've got to take your hat off to him, though, because he's actually he's extending his lead over the 6 chasers. He's 3:29 ahead of those 6 men. And you have to wonder about his tactics, because if you can ride like this is a man who could possibly finish in the first 3 to 5 places overall in the Tour de France. But his goal was something different. His goal was the King of the Mountains jersey.
It's got to be a concern, because he was 14th in his first Tour de France. There's been no indication he was going to come here as a listed favourite, and indeed he has not. But now Michael Rasmussen, in 2 days of racing, has got a clear lead in the King of the Mountains. But, you know, he's a frail young boy. He may have trouble on the high mountains of the Alps.
He might have problems one day or another in the big Alpine passes. And I think what he's doing this afternoon is trying to lay down the foundations to win that competition, a competition which he actually announced before the start of the race, not to us, but to a former professional bike rider from Denmark by the name of Rolf Sørensen. He told Rolf, he said, I'm going to win that. I'm going to go out on the first mountain stage and get as many points as possible. Well, he did that yesterday, and he's backing it up again today.
He only looks a youngster, but in fact Michael is now 31 years of age here. So he's come on the bomb. He's only won 4 races, but he can climb. Here we go. This is over the top for the 2 Sebastians, Jolly and Eno, who are pace-making Thor Hushovd back into the caravan over the top of the Buisson. and hopefully back into the race on the long descent.
Well, Phil, just coming back to what you were saying about Rasmussen, maybe he's only won 4 races on the road, but he's actually won a lot of mountain bike races, including a World Championships, and that was back, I think, in 1999, which made him very much a big favourite for the Olympic Games in Sydney, but there he faltered, and he finished only in 22nd place. That was a big shock to this man, because I think he felt that the Olympic gold medal was something that he deserved, having won the world title the year before.
Yes, indeed. Well, Michael Rasmussen started his mountain biking career in 1992, Paul, when he was 3rd in the World Junior Championships. So he took a while to get used to this road racing game. He won his world title in mountain biking in 1999. And disappointed 22nd in the Olympic Games in Sydney in 2000. That's his mountain bike record. I have to dig rather deep for those. I didn't think I'd need to use them again.
Well, when you've been a world champion in some discipline of the sport, that never leaves you. And normally this man, when he used to race, he was allowed to wear the World Championship bands on his shoulders, but the world governing body now have decided that you can only wear the world bands on your racing jersey in the discipline of which he used to be a former world champion. So Rasmussen, he really is burning up the road here.
Just look at these crowds here now. This is the chasing group of 6. Not getting any closer. Since Rasmussen dropped Cioni, he's gone further ahead. In fact, they'll be picking up Cioni very shortly. Then Cioni will have to change his tactics and try to chase back up to the leader again. But they are working hard. We're now on the very lower slopes here of the Ballon d'Alsace. This is a very, very revered mountain in the Tour de France. The very first mountain we ever climbed in 1905. And this also, by the way, was the venue in 1969 when the great man, Eddy Merckx, got his first stage win in a Tour de France. And he won the Tour de France 5 times straight after that. Looked rather a young man. It was Felice Gimondi on his back wheel there. The man from the Faima coffee machine stomped his name on the Ballon d'Alsace. Looks a bit different today when we get to the top, but Eddie won't forget it. He's 60 years of age just 2 weeks ago. Now it's a young man, half of Eddy Merckx's age right now, at 31 years of age. Michael Rasmussen on the climb of the Ballon d'Alsace, and the peloton continues to fall back with our little yellow jersey there. Lance Armstrong, 9:24. The chase group of 1:45 is Cioni going backwards. The real chase group is now at 3:41, and I have to say, going backwards. This rider's waiting for nobody today. We thought he might have waited and got together with a group he could work with. But I think he now must be thinking, if I get over the top of the Ballon d'Alsace with a lead, I'm not just going to be the king of the mountains tomorrow for the rest day, I'm going to be the leader as well. So good luck to him now as he starts the move here on his way. His face is giving us nothing here. Nothing whatsoever as he continues the lower slopes of the Ballon d'Alsace. Well, I mentioned the rest day. Well, that is tomorrow. These riders will be making their way down by aircraft tonight to Mulhouse. We will be with you, of course, with a program. It'll be on Eastern Time, 8 p.m, Pacific Time, 9 p.m, and you will enjoy seeing the first 9 stages of the Tour, and the Americans have been playing a major role in the Tour de France this year. As the chasers still work out how they're going to pack Michael Rasmussen. Remember that when the race resumes on Tuesday, we are in the Alps, and we'll be live with you on Tuesday morning at 8:30 Eastern Time. That's 5:30 over on the West Coast. Expanded prime-time coverage at 8 Eastern and 9 Pacific. The Tour de France goes on and goes on into the Alps, and that is going to be a spectacular day of racing. Don't miss it. So far, it's been a pretty spectacular day of racing today. Lance Armstrong and his team regaining confidence and have been trying to slow the race down a little bit, I think. It's exactly what Lance Armstrong said he would do, Paul, which would be to try and get his team thinking like a team again. And if it meant throwing the jersey away for a day or two, then that's what he would do.
It doesn't matter to Lance Armstrong how many days he wears the yellow jersey. The most important thing is to wear the yellow jersey on the final day, on the Champs-Élysées, after the 3 weeks of racing. If he loans it out to somebody else for a couple of days, not a problem. If tactically it helps the team, not a problem. And I think that's what he's thinking here this afternoon. But the team certainly does seem to be getting themselves back in order. After all, looking at this team on paper, Phil, this to me is the strongest team that Lance Armstrong has ever fielded. And I can't understand at all, and maybe only after the Tour de France will we understand exactly what happened yesterday on the slopes of the Col de la Schlucht.
They may never work it out. It was just one of those things. But it happens the first day in the mountains after long days spent racing at nearly 50 kilometers an hour on the flat. Armstrong there, always under the escort of his team, and also the other team in Mauve, Team Mauve, always looking to see exactly where he is, and they always ride in the same place.
And Jan Ullrich there on the left-hand side wearing number 11, never very far away from Lance Armstrong. It's amazing the mutual respect that these two riders have for each other. Armstrong has always said that as far as he's concerned, the most talented athlete in the sport is the man there wearing number 11. Now there's a little bit of a maneuver here.
I saw Roberto Heras also on the shoulder of Armstrong there, Paul, so he might be a little bit of a dark horse for this year's Tour. He looks as though he's riding very well.
Heras is riding very well, but in fact, strangely enough, he's behind his teammate Yoshiba Bolocchi, who I was surprised got selection for the Tour de France team. Bolocchi is 16th, and Roberto Heras, a two-time winner of the Tour of Spain, is in 20th place. But he's 3 minutes behind Armstrong already.
Time to make up in the mountains, of course. Heras is a great climber. He was the teammate of Armstrong and led him to a Tour victory a couple of years ago, especially riding through the Alps, where now he's going to have to learn to attack Armstrong in the Alps. Latest checks coming at us now. It's 3:58 to the big chasers, 9:33 to the peloton. They're not showing any real chase back, are they?
No chase back at all. But this man here, Rasmussen, is absolutely flying. He's not showing any weakness. There's been no telltale signs at all in his body to show that he's getting tired, that he's starting to feel the pace of this climb that he's put in. He attacked, let's not forget, on the very first climb of the day. It's exactly what he did yesterday. Got himself maximum points over the first 4 climbs, then sat up and waited for the main field. Today there's no waiting.
I don't think there's been a day quite like it in the history of the Rabobank team, one of the best teams in the world, but they've never had a Tour contender before. They've had a pretender in Michael Bogart, but never a contender, and I think they might have a contender today in Rasmussen, as he's now cutting at a trail on his own through the mountains heading towards Mulhouse. And we're beginning to start the climb here for the chasers now of the Grand Ballon, of the Ballon d'Alsace. In fact, that was the back of the peloton, but the same applies as we now head towards the break. I can tell you when you come back, you can watch uninterrupted coverage of the climb of the Ballon d'Alsace for the next half hour. See you in a moment. There's the gentle wind on today's stage of the Tour de France, where they say it rips across the top of the Ballon d'Alsace. That's where we're headed right now. Armstrong's group still under the escort of the Team Discovery, and they are losing ground on the race all today. The one leader on the road, Michael Rasmussen, is actually now making big ground even on the chase. Dario Gioni is back at 2 minutes and 50. The 6-man chase has gone back to almost 4 minutes, and the peloton with Armstrong at 9:38. Well, there is a great crowd on the Ballon. We expected it. This is a magical mountain in the Tour de France, especially this year. Now we've just seen Pavel Padronos drop away. Not surprisingly, here he is. He has done an incredible day of work today. His job is done. He's just got to get home now.
Big job of work done for this man. It was interesting in the L'Equipe newspaper this morning talking about Lance Armstrong's 1999 Tour de France, and Frankie Andreu was saying that the team pulled themselves inside out. None of them were great climbers, but when they were asked by Johan Brunel to set the tempo, they seemed to be able to do it just 2 or 3 or 4 kilometers further up the climbs, and that's exactly what Pavel Padronos has done here.
Yeah, he's had a great day. Nobody will criticize him now. He's done his job today, and now it's up to the others to stay with Lance Armstrong while he just drops off. Will suffer a little bit, but will hopefully ride home, not losing too much time. He still has the climb to come, and then a 56-kilometer ride to the finish. So it's a long way. There he is, number 6. He's now back in this group with Tom Bonan, who was in that bunch, Paul. We never saw him, but he's not in it now.
He's not in it now. Tom Bonan will ride the next couple of days and try and recuperate from that nasty crash he had a couple of days ago. Injured his back quite severely. Tom is 126th overall, but that's not really a problem for him. The most important thing for Tom Bonan is that green jersey he's got on his shoulders. He wants that jersey. He wants to take it all the way to Paris, but to do so as a sprinter, he's got to drag his big body over the mountain passes.
Well, his old mate nearest camera here, Kevin Holtzmans, he's been left to look after him. So too Bram Tanking just in front, and Guido Tronti, his lead-out man on the far side. They've been told to stay with Tom, look after him, get him through to the finishing line in good shape. Jan Ulrich has snuck himself up to the front here now, and Mancebo is off to the right of Valverde, as we are now looking at the tempo clearly picking up here. This might not be an easy climb for these boys today. Let's have a look at the profile of the race route. Here we are. This is AMD's map profile. That's where we've been today, over the Gros Pierre, the Col de Figne, all the time being won by Michael Rasmussen. 3 third categories he's got the points for, 6 for the first every time. Then he got 10 for the second category climb, another 6 over the third. He's now looking for the big score on the top of the Ballon d'Alsace. And these are the climbs in detail today. We've been over the high spot, but we still have to climb the Col d'Alsace itself. The Grand Ballon is the high point today at 4,390. We're on the Ballon now, 3,842. When we last visited this region, which is a way back now, 1997, the Ballon d'Alsace, it was the former champion of France, Didier Roux, who led the peloton over the top. It wasn't long after that, if memory serves me right, he gave up the race too. Anyway, these are the boys trying to, and there's only 3 of them left in the chase now. Well, it looks, Paul, as though we've got rid of the 3 riders here. And the strong men will out, because Christophe Moreau and Jens Voigt, and it looks as though we've got, surprisingly, Vicioso.
Well, Vicioso seems to be a much more comfortable rider on this steeper climb here. Race radio crackling through with the name of Stuart O'Grady, and that's not unfortunate at the front of the group, but Stuart O'Grady going off the back of the peloton, like most of the other sprinters seem to be doing. That would indicate that Lance Armstrong and Discovery Channel, Phil, have just turned up the crank a little bit at the front end of the main field.
Right, and that will be a very select group of the heads of state, I think, by midway up this climb today. But Jens Voigt still sniffs a golden jersey. Christophe Moreau is smelling a high position in the overall classification. And while little Angel Vicioso, normally a sprinter, must be wondering what he's doing in this company.
He must be wondering what he's doing, but he had a very tough patch a few moments ago, but all of a sudden he seems to have recovered somewhat, and he's quite comfortably sitting on the tail there of Jens Voigt and Christophe Moreau. Moreau is riding one of the best days I've seen him ride in the Tour over the last couple of seasons, but this man is really turning the race on fire. Michael Rasmussen, a former world champion at mountain biking, he, to put it in your language, Phil, is absolutely dancing on the pedals.
He certainly is, and they're not looking like a man is about to crack in a hurry either. The race referee there, in fact, he looks like my Christian Prudhomme, who was there. The next race director of the Tour de France is the assistant, indicating to the crowd, stay back, but this is an orderly crowd here as they come onto the mountain, and this guy is soaking up the atmosphere. He's got himself a huge lead in 2 days in the King of the Mountains.
Done a great
well
job.
Done too.
Great job. I think yesterday was tactically superb, Phil, because there were 4 third category climbs in the first 40 kilometers of the race. He went out and got maximum points and then decided it's a long way to go to the finish. I'm not sure that this breakaway is going to succeed, so I'll go back to the group. And this man here, Eric Decker. I can't say enough about Eric Decker. He's suffering here on the climb, but he basically sorted out the morale of the team because he went into the breakaways on the early days. And let's not forget, he won himself the King of the Mountains jersey as well for 24 hours.
He's had himself 4 stages over the past in the Tour de France, but he'd be very happy. I'm sure he's part of the tactic over the dinner table last night with Michael, and Michael, his teammate, now up the road. Vasseur, heartbeat's getting a bit higher for him, 172, 174 as I speak, a maximum of 192.
Well,
is
it's an indication.
No.
It's an indication that the pressure going up. Angle Vicioso. Well, sorry guys, can't stay with the train.
Had to happen.
Well, he was in difficulty a little earlier on, and right now what he's got to do is basically, if you're in this situation, forget about trying to stay in contact with two guys who are setting a much harder pace. Sit back, try and relax. If you can relax on a climb like the Ballon d'Alsace and get into a rhythm which is comfortable for yourself, because if you go too far into the red zone, you never recover. They've just stopped the Liquigas team there, and that's because just in front there you can see Dario Cioni.
Well, we want no tapping on the back because riders get penalised for that, but the referees probably won't do anything about that one. But now it is two very, very strong bike riders against one man who has sprouted wings and is flying away from the race. If they can bring him back, well, Voigt will be the next yellow jersey if he's still clear, of course, of Lance Armstrong by more than 58 seconds when we get down to the finishing line. Still 2 time bonus sprints to come, and now it looks as though, in fact, Jens Voigt, at least at worst, could finish second in those time bonus sprints, so he could be looking at quite a good day out today.
Could be looking at a very good day out. They've caught Cioni. We just saw his team car stopped a few moments ago. That was an indication that he wasn't far in front. Christophe Moreau here is setting a phenomenal pace, and I think Jens Voigt now quite happy to take second place. But Jens Voigt will recover as soon as he gets to the top of this climb, and you see him administering his power once again.
The popularity of the Tour de France in the mountains there for all to see. The crowds have been over every mountain today. They're fully international, of course. They're not just French anymore. You get every nationality flocking into this country. It must be worth millions and millions now in income for the tourism industry. A little chance here. Is this Oscar Pereiro trying to go clear the first attack?
There's a move coming off the front end of the peloton, which is still very much being led by Team Discovery Channel. And that's the important thing about Armstrong. He needs to rally the troops here this afternoon.
On the snake as we climb up the Ballon d'Alsace. This is the climb now of the Ballon d'Alsace, and this is the lone leader. And what a ride he has done today. I think he got away after 2 kilometers this morning. He's now some 60 kilometers from the finish. He's won every mountain. Riders have come and paid him a visit. He sent them back to the bunch. He's on his own. And look at the crowd now, just trying to catch a glimpse of Michael Rasmussen.
Phil, this is an unbelievable crowd. They have turned out here to see the Ballon d'Alsace. This is not the highest climb in the Vosges, but it's the southernmost climb in the Vosges Mountains. And this man has absolutely lit the race on fire. A little bit of air to breathe as they move behind the barriers here, but he has got every point this afternoon on every mountain pass. He is laying down the foundations here for a crack at winning the King of the Mountains classification.
He has topped the Ballon d'Alsace, 56 kilometers to go now, as the field behind is splitting up in the chase back. But the main field is still riding tempo here as the boys in the breakaway look to be dropping back. Lance Armstrong has kept an iron grip with his team on the field today, and the big men, well, they haven't played a card yet. This is a move by Lance to shift his yellow jersey onto the shoulders of number 28, Jens Voigt. It may be onto the shoulders of Michael Rasmussen. We won't know that until we get the time gaps at the finish, if they survive.
If they survive. Well, if Michael Rasmussen, Phil, wants to take the lead away from Jens Voigt, he's going to have to finish in front of him by 6 minutes and 5 seconds. And I think that's a tall order because these guys are going to recuperate on the descent.
In theory.
And it's still a long way to go to the finish. It's 56 kilometers from the top of the climb.
They're currently 4:22 behind the leader, these two riders. It didn't, afraid Dario Cioni didn't stay with them too long. They're now about to enter this corridor of people here as they ride up towards the summit. The camper van's down there. It must have been a good night last night on the Ballon d'Alsace, enjoying a beer in the middle of nowhere on what would have been a beautiful evening as well. And all nationalities just enjoying the atmosphere which only the Tour de France can engender.
Christophe Moreau riding superbly there, but the tempo here being set by the lieutenants of Lance Armstrong. Hincapie just there in front of him. Behind him you can see Paolo Salvadelli. The faithful lieutenant here on the front is Chechu Rubiera, followed by Beltran. So behind him he's still got two very strong men in hand. Jaroslav Popovic and Paolo Salvadelli.
And if you think it's easy up there, look at the back here. Riders slowly slipping out of our picture under severe pressure as they continue the climb. Just past Thierry Marichal there, there's Cofidis getting into the riders who have not yet quite cracked. Here comes Stewie O'Grady. This is all looking very tough at the back, and yet they're just staying calm and collected. Giovanni Lombardi is there. Look at the gaps now.
The gaps are opening. I also quickly caught a sight there of Luke Roberts, the Australian rider on Team CSC. He's also going out of the back. He was brought into this Tour de France team here to be a member of the team time trial. Further up, Kurt Atla-Arvidsson is going out. See, Team CSC, Phil, for a team that want to challenge here, are losing a lot of men on this slope.
The pressure is really on them. I wasn't sure whether that was Bolocki who may have just passed through, but I only caught a glimpse of his number, and it did look like his stylo as we're now racing through up into the group. The pressure has been applied now by the Discovery Channel. It is called tempo riding, and Armstrong is hurting as many men as he can in the bunch. I think today you could say Lance is getting his own back.
Little bit of sweet revenge, I think, here this afternoon, but still you've got very much in contact there. Jan Ullrich, Alexander Vinokourov, and of course Andreas Kloden. These two men have lost a massive chunk of climb. The lone leader, Michael Rasmussen, started the climb with a 2.5-minute advantage over these two riders, and now at the summit he has 4 minutes lead.
Well, these are the two riders now. Christophe Moreau of France, and followed by Jens Voigt, the German cyclist, very popular boy. As they race towards the summit now of the Ballon d'Alsace, Rasmussen has long since gone over, currently plunging down the other side, heading to the valley, and hopefully heading to the stage victory, which I think we'll all agree he richly deserves that. He's a clear leader in the King of the Mountains. He's won every climb today. There's the crowd cheering up second and third.
I don't think anybody expected quite this battle on the Ballon d'Alsace here this afternoon. This is a magnificent crowd. These are the crowds that we'd only expect in the roads of the Alps and the Pyrenees, but today they've certainly turned out in style for the roads over the Vosges. The time gap at the summit here for Christophe Moreau is in excess of 4 minutes, Phil. It's stopping at 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Michael Rasmussen is riding away with this.
Well, and Moreau is riding himself up into second place in the King of the Mountains with that fine ride. He's looking like he has returned to the old Christophe of past. Voigt here will stay with Christophe. They'll work together. They're both strong enough. There shouldn't be a weak one there, in the hope that Voigt will take yellow.
Well, the funny thing about a rider like Jens Voigt, he's slightly limited in the mountains, but once he goes over the summit of that climb, all of a sudden his strength will come back to him. He will now begin to contribute with Christophe Moreau, and I think they might start to close in on that gap of Michael Rasmussen's. After all, they've still got 34 miles to go before they get to the finish.
Well, it doesn't sound long, does it? But it is. As we look here now, the rider with the red number on, that's the winner yesterday, Peter Weening. He's in a little bit of trouble at the moment, but he's got a good climber in front of him, the Frenchman David Moncoutier.
It looks like Thomas Vogt
in front. Yeah, they've lost a little bit of edge, but they'll fight their way back in. They're just hanging on. They should get back on the descent.
Take a few risks on the descent, and then hopefully you can reintegrate the front end of the main field, because I think we're going to be treated here to a charge off the slopes of the Ballon d'Alsace as we try and pull the race back together on the roads into Mulhouse. Armstrong looks very comfortable. He admitted yesterday he was able to easily counter the moves by Alexander Vinokourov, but he didn't want to chase everybody down. He knew the man that he wanted to watch the most, and that was Vinokourov. Once Kloden went, he said, well, I won't chase them all down, and at least I've got a 2.5-minute lead on him anyway.
The thing is, his pace set by the team today on this particular climb has been such that nobody has been able to attack. There's the face of Thomas Vogler. 10 days in yellow last year. He built his reputation on that. He's a little bit behind this year. He's not going to get yellow. 27 minutes in the overall situation. He should get back into this group. But Armstrong has set such a pace with his team today, he's done nothing himself, that he's stopped all of the attacks. The mountains are now behind them for the day. It's the run into Mulhouse, and advantage Armstrong now.
Well, yesterday he was very much on the defensive, alone at the summit of the final climb of the day. Today, he has got 5 very strong teammates around him. And the names of those teammates are men who could ride high in the overall classification themselves. Acevedo, Beltran, Chechu Rubiera, Popovic, and of course Paolo Salvadelli. But this is the gruppetto, the autobus, if you like. These men, all they think about is getting to the finish without getting eliminated.
Robbie McEwen, the champion of Australia there. Also Tom Bowman. This is Mikel Astalosa. Oh, sorry, that's Jean-Patrick Nazon. The other sprinter who's also falling back. All the sprinters going to come home together. No points for them today in the green jersey, as Lance Armstrong sits here behind his faithful teammate George Hincapie, while the pace is continuing with Rubiera, and they're doing extremely well. They've broken the spirit of the attackers today. They've got themselves a nice little race under control.
This team is so dedicated to one cause when it comes to the month of July. That cause is pacing Lance Armstrong through the difficulties until he decides he wants to stamp out his authority. He looked a little bit fragile yesterday when he had to make all of the moves himself. He had to chase down the attacks of Alexander Vinokourov with not a single teammate alongside him. I think today, after the discussion last night at the dinner table, Phil, they want to make a statement to Armstrong to say, Lance, we're back and we're good.
Thomas Volker there looking up the road. Shades of last year when he was looking up the road for the clock, and he kept his yellow jersey by 22 seconds. I remember Lance saying then, the guy suffers like that, he deserves to keep the race lead. He's losing ground this time. Michael Rasmussen has 30 points over the top. He's done very well today. He's got a great lead in the King of the Mountains. Great lead.
Massive lead in the King of the Mountains, and now he's keeping his massive lead on the descent. The front end of the race here for Michael Rasmussen, and he's certainly not looking like a man showing any signs of weakness at all, and that would be a great coup really for Team Rabobank, because not only has this man taken the lead in the King of the Mountains classification yesterday, but if he can survive to the finish, that'll give him 2 stage wins in a row.
He's got about an hour to survive because of the downhill. He should manage 30 miles an hour. Man of this quality mustn't take too many risks here. Look at this skill of a mountain biking expert.
I tell you what, he's
flicks it through the chicane.
He's going a lot faster than that.
Flying.
I would say this man in this part of the course here is touching almost 50 miles an hour. 80 kilometers an hour would be his average speed down here. He's all over the machine, and he's cutting very nice lines into those corners.
Well, I reckon these guys will be 10 minutes down by the top of the climb if he continues with that sort of speed. This is over the top of the Ballon d'Alsace, and 9:25 is the official gap over the top. But of course, they've already gone down the other side. The Ballon d'Alsace is now behind the Tour de France for the latest time in 100 years history of it being in the Tour. And the men driving, Discovery Channel, and Lance Armstrong sitting there as cool as you like.
Armstrong's very happy there with the performance of his team up to the summit of that climb. There is no sign at all of weakness in them this afternoon. They're all there, ready and present, apart from Benjamin Noval and, of course, Pavel Padronos, who did a phenomenal first 150 kilometers of racing.
Well, time to sort themselves out here now. I don't think they're going down as fast as we've just seen Michael Rasmussen go down. This guy's still pulling away at the most crucial stage of the stage today. 5:12 to chase number 3. That's the second half of the leading group. 5:05 to these two. Peloton at 9:24. These are still big gaps with less than 30 miles to go. Jens Voigt should still be the leader-elect on the road.
This is a statue to Joan of Arc here, which was put up at the top of this climb of the Ballon d'Alsace, and that was really to symbolize the French people's attachment to the Alsace region. And today we are seeing a great performance by a Frenchman in second place on the road, Christophe Moreau, because he is flying down this mountain. But looking at the group there, Phil, that's not a very big peloton.
No, it is not. And we now have a beautiful descent through the woods here, always twisting and turning. And then we'll change direction bound for Malouse. This boy just locks in on those speed wobbles, checks the bike at exactly the right moment. He is a real skillful bike rider.
Fabulous bike handler, getting rid of that bottle. He's picking great lines. You look how he goes, straight line between each of these corners. This one, just check this out now. He's moved over to the right-hand side, swinging across to the left-hand side as he takes in that bend, and that will keep him at a very high speed. He is coming off this mountain at 50 miles an hour currently, and he's looking at around about 44 kilometers to go to the finish. I wonder if he can survive.
I'm beginning to think he can. Who's going to catch him? This guy is on a day possessed. He's heading now into Overbrook, which is where the sprint is. It won't be any sprint, of course. He'll get a small time bonus of 6 seconds. Not even interested. And he'll even get $1,000 or 800 euros. Not interested. It's the finish now.
He's not worried about that at all. He's done what he set out to do, get himself maximum points in the King of the Mountains classification. Now all he can think about is hoping that he can survive to the finish. And the way he's riding, it really is going to be almost a pursuit race between him and these two chasers who have lost themselves 4 minutes and 15 seconds at the top of the climb. They've got a big job in hand if they want to try and pull him back, because I can't see that man slowing down very much at all today.
He's looking awfully like a stage winner, and he'll bring the house down when he comes home. He never won anything in his tour last year, but he rode on the mountain with some strong men. He finished 14th in Paris. This year, with that experience, he has become a real threat, I think.
A serious threat. He most certainly today, if he holds on to a large chunk of this advantage, will be looking at finishing very high up in the overall classification in Paris. These two guys, plenty of energy, plenty of speed too for Christophe Moreau at the front and Jens Voigt. Once we get to the flatter part, you'll see big Jens Voigt with his massive diesel engine picking himself up to cruising speed once more.
Well, these two are going down nothing like as quick as Michael Rasmussen. Oh, that's a dizzy old picture, but there he is, just in the frame. Those long, thin bronze legs of Rasmussen. Well, Rolf Sorensen did tell us he was a great bike rider. Rolf was the 11th cyclist in the world of the Tour de France to have to abandon while wearing the yellow jersey. He broke his collarbone in the north of France, but he said to us yesterday, he said, watch for Michael Rasmussen. He's told me he's going to take the lead in the King of the Mountains today. He did. He's also told Rolf he's going to win the title in Paris, and I wouldn't bet against it.
Right now, I wouldn't bet against this man because he's got himself already a huge advantage. But just coming back to finish that story about Rolf Sorensen, when he had to abandon with the yellow jersey on his shoulder, he actually finished the stage that day with a broken collarbone.
Continue with the broken collarbone. They wouldn't let him.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. There's some tough bike riders out on the roads of the Tour de France. That's why there are so many legendary stories about this great race. Nobody wants to give up. Nobody wants to abandon. There is something very special about the Tour.
Well, these two boys are still hovering, and at the moment Jens Voigt is still the leader of the Tour de France today on the highway. But if he drops for more than 6 minutes behind Michael Rasmussen, he won't be. At the moment, he's 4:09. We touch and go, this.
Mainfield closing in a fraction there. They're about 9 minutes behind the leading man, who's on the road on his own. I think Armstrong will be quite happy with the way the team has been performing there. Just a quick chat there. I think he was talking to Paolo Salvadelli at the front end of the group, maybe telling him not to panic too much. It would be quite a nice situation for them if they allowed Jens Voigt to take the yellow jersey, because that would put the responsibility of controlling the race firmly on the shoulders of Team CSC.
Well, remember, the breakaway of 6 is still split on the highway, and it looks as though those three chasers may be getting on turns. Rasmussen has 88 points now, and he's 48 ahead of Christophe Moreau, who's come up in the second place in the mountains. Voigt has come into third with 37 points today.
This is Big George here on the front, leading him down, just looking over his shoulder, making sure he's not putting Lance Armstrong into a situation that might be somewhat dangerous. While at the rear end of the group, you can see this is not the place. That's Matthias Kessler with his hand in the air.
Wants help.
Remember him a couple of years ago in the Tour de France, had a dramatic crash in the mountains. I think it's Tobias Steinhauser who seems to have a problem.
I think he's got a flat tyre. Well, that's unfortunate coming down the hills here. When you use your brakes a lot, the tyres get hot, the rims get hot, can cause an explosion.
It's happened on a number of occasions in the past, and Michael Rasmussen started today in 68th place in the overall standings, 7.5 minutes behind Lance Armstrong. Right now, he is leading the two chasers, Jens Voigt and Christophe Moreau, by 4 minutes and 2 seconds.
Michael Rasmussen's doing the time trial of his life today. He's using a lot of energy. I hope he's saving a bit for the near 2 weeks still remaining in the Tour de France. Rest day tomorrow, chance to go for a little bicycle ride to loosen off, and then back in the saddle in the high Alps on Tuesday. And he's set himself a huge target now. These are the two chasers, and look at Jens Voigt. This is when Jens comes into his own. when the road's level, this boy's got some power.
He's got some power, but you know, one thing more than that he's got, Phil, is a massive amount of courage. He really digs into that suitcase of courage on a number of occasions to fight it out, to battle on the roads of the Tour. He lives for aggression. He rides an aggressive race, and here these guys, I think they'll start to eat into that advantage of Michael Rasmussen a fraction. But if Rasmussen doesn't slow down, I cannot really see anybody pulling him back.
Well, they're pulled a little bit back, even on the man up front at the moment, because they're down to just over 8 minutes. Jens Voigt, number 28 here. He's now 33 years of age, got a lot of power, and he's 167 pounds of body weight. And he is a stage winner in Paris-Nice this year. He's had a wonderful season this year. And he's won a stage in the Tour de France. He's worn the yellow jersey for a day. He's worn the King of the Mountains jersey for a day. He could be wearing the yellow jersey again tonight. And here we are into the sprint in Oberbruck. And so a 6-second bonus now for Rasmussen. But Jens Voigt will take an interest in that as well, because he is trying to get rid of Lance Armstrong.
Well, Jens Voigt has got himself a 2-second time bonus here this afternoon, and a 4-second time bonus certainly won't go adrift.
Well, there's a long flat road ahead still to come as they head now towards Mulhouse. There's the banner for Michael Rasmussen as he continues over the line. Well, it's a long way still to go. 40 kilometres, 25 miles at these speeds, about 57 minutes of cycling. There is the finish. We're all waiting, and they're expecting Lance to come home first. We'll know all very soon. Rejoin us. Thank you. We're still on the descent of the Ballon d'Alsace for the main peloton, but they are still just inside 9 minutes behind the runaway leader today. They're piling into the town of Oberbruck, where Rasmussen has gone through quite a few minutes ago now. Taken the 6 seconds bonus. We're waiting for the arrival of the two chasers, and that's Jens Voigt and Christophe Moreau. The remnants of that breakaway out in between, and then the peloton at just on 9 minutes. Here we are in Oberbruck, and I don't think Voigt will be stopped from taking the small bonus here of 4 seconds. More important to give it to him right now, as Moreau just keeps setting the pace nicely. Not far to go now, 23 miles. It's a bit of a bigger gear he's pushing on now. And here comes Jens over the top to take the time bonus. That means he will have picked up 6 seconds time bonus now. So he only has to finish down at the finishing line. There's some 54 seconds ahead of Armstrong for yellow.
Could be important, those seconds that he's getting out on the course of these intermediary sprint points, because this race might be decided. Problem here at the back, and I think that was yesterday's stage winner who had a flat tyre there, Wienberg. We'll see if we spot the red number. No, it's Menchov.
It's Menchov,
number
yeah.
51.
Never mind, he's got a wheel, but I don't know where he is on the race right now. I suspect he was in the Lance Armstrong group.
I would hope that he was.
There's no cars there at all just now, so it's a hard chase for him.
I would hope that he was, because he is the leader of the Rabobank squad rider, wearing number 51.
We are looking at Discovery Channel, who are now at the head of the race at 8 minutes 58. Michael Rasmussen has won the sprint, such as it was. He was by himself ahead of Jens Voigt and Moreau. He's left with 40 kilometres left to race now. He still has a lead of 5 minutes, and he could well take the stage.
Levi Leipheimer just moving up around the outside there. He's been very quiet since the start of this year's Tour de France. He hasn't had any accidents. Remember a couple of years ago when he went down in that very nasty crash on the first stage on the open road and ended up having a very nasty fracture. And because of that fracture, he wasn't able to continue in the event.
There he is, still riding a lone trail towards home. He might make it. So as we look at the face now of Michael Rasmussen, he knows now he's got a chance of getting a good win today. Let me remind you what's coming up when we finish our live coverage today of the Tour de France. It is Outdoor Investigations, and that's up next. It'll be 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Still in a hurry for the finish. Jens Voigt thinking, surely I haven't made all this effort for nothing today, as he tries to now wrest the yellow off Lance Armstrong. This is the chase back of Denis Menchov. Well, the long empty road, but they've sent first aid back here. Franco Pelazzotti is the leaky gas rider. It might well be Peter Weening who's come back here for Menchov.
Having a look through there, it was very difficult for this man because he punctured at exactly the wrong time when none of the team cars were around. And that's why you have to have teammates alongside you at every occasion. And that's why Lance Armstrong, I think yesterday, Phil, was very lucky on the final slopes of that climb, because if he'd had a flat tire at that point, the team cars were an awful long way behind.
It's ironic, we've got the Rabobank rider running away with the lead, and he's got the man who was thought was going to be a big challenger chasing to get back onto the bunch right now. Michael Rasmussen, clear leader in the King of the Mountains. He won't be wiped out even on day one in the Alps now. He's got enough points in the bank to survive a little while. 5:05 to the two-man chase. And the gap, 9 minutes 4. The peloton have started to lose ground again. Now this is good news for Michael. Just look at the face here now. A little bit of expression for the first time on the face of Michael Rasmussen. He has looked so cool until now, but now we're seeing a face, a little bit of desperation creeping in, because now he wants to win the stage. We'll find out if he can when we come back. Welcome back, as the Tour de France now is in its last 40 minutes or so of today's stage, and this is the lone leader here as he crashes down the highway towards the finish in Mulhouse. He's wiped out the King of the Mountains today. He has been truly the king, winning every climb. Now he's changed his ambition. He's trying to win the stage. 9 minutes 4 seconds the gap ahead of the peloton, and the chasers are not getting any closer. They are at 4:03. They've actually pulled back. I think it's 2 seconds. Michael Rasmussen is on fire today. Well, let's also remind you that this man, I reckon you might say, is pretty fit. Want to test your cycling fitness at thousands of cycling events around the United States? Well, visit active.com, click on the cycling page, find tours, centuries and races in your neighborhood. The best part is you can register online instantly at active.com. Also sign up for the Daily Tour. That's a free Tour de France newsletter. It carries updates, commentary and a chance to win great cycling prizes. This is an exclusive partnership between active.com and OLN. There's the face now of Jens Voigt. Is it the face of the next Maillot Jaune? They're looking a little bit tired now. Christophe Moreau just doing his share, but they're at 5 minutes 50. That's the second chase. Remember, the breakaway split up and they're still away from the field. 4:04 to the first two riders on the road.
In fact, they pulled it back to 3:45. I thought they were turning it the other way, but since then they've actually lost themselves about a quarter of a minute. I think they're just settling themselves in now to ride to the finish. I think they're almost resigned to the fact that they ain't going to catch the Flying Dane.
No, I don't think they are, Paul. And he's never won a stage of the Tour de France before. This is his second tour. He finished 14th, but he was almost anonymous on that ride to 14th. He just managed to hold the wheels that mattered in the mountains, turn in a respectable time trial, but we never actually talked much about him. We did know his ability, though, and he's coming out big time this weekend. He's only lost one of the climbs in a weekend of racing, which is incredible. And that was the Col de la Schlucht yesterday.
Incredible, because this man has said before the start of the Tour de France that was his major aim. And I think today, by doing what he's done, he's also laying himself down the foundations for a very high place in the overall classification. 1,000 meters now to the final sprint point of the day. And this is going to be in the small town of Sentheim at 28 kilometers to go to the finish. I think something very special will have to happen, Phil, if this man is going to get caught before the end, because he is not showing and hasn't showed any sign of weakness at all today.
He has won every prize on the road except the one he gave away to Dario Cioni because he was helping him early on. Cioni couldn't hold his pace and dropped back. Otherwise, Rasmussen has earned himself a lot of money today, a lot of kudos, and he's certainly a clear leader in the King of the Mountains. He could well be finishing this off with a stage win. We're now looking at the green and white of Christophe Moreau, licking his lips, continuing the chase and getting nowhere, frankly. Number 101, Christophe Moreau. Number 28, Jens Voigt. They're still perplexed. They're holding off the field by minutes, but they can't get any closer to Michael Rasmussen. It's still looking good for Voigt as the new race leader of the Tour tonight, but there's a new challenger in the Tour de France now.
There certainly is, but I can't believe that Michael Rasmussen could put in this much effort on a race like this and recuperate to think about riding high in the overall classification. If he tries to ride for the polka dot jersey, well, then he's going to leave a lot of ammunition out on the slopes of the Alps and the Pyrenees. Look at the way he is riding, though, now, Phil. If you look at the way this man's body is talking to us, his body language is saying he is hyper-motivated. He's going into a moment here where his body is screaming for help, but he's turning it down.
Absolutely amazing piece of cycling today. So, as we wait now for the next group to come through, just while we're watching here, the man who's a real specialist, let's go and see what Frankie Andreo has in store for us today in his Infinity Technology of the Tour.
In preparing Levi Leipheimer for the Tour de France, Specialized came out with a brand new bike 1 month ago at the Dauphiné, the Tarmac SL. Levi's bike frame only weighs 920 grams, one of the lightest bikes out there. And the reason they're able to do this is because of the proprietary AZ1, which is the way they cure the carbon. Now, the objective using space-age technology and computers is to make the bike lighter, stiffer, and of course safer, which is a very important fact considering you have to go on the same bike throughout the entire 3 weeks of the Tour de France.
Amazing. And that's our Infinity Technology of the Tour. And I was just thinking there, the bikes were a bit heavier in 1905, the last time, the very first time we came over the mountain of the Ballon d'Alsace. These two riders are hanging in and they're looking for second and third place, I think, because they're not going to catch up with the flyer today. He is just in a world of his own. Michael Rasmussen out of mind and out of sight. Jens Voigt and Christophe Moreau, a big play for these two today, and you have to take your hat off to Jens Voigt. He wanted that yellow jersey and he's gone out and he's caught Lance Armstrong, I think, in a generous mood today. 4:04 to these two riders is the latest time check. Meanwhile, at the front of the race, Paolo Savidelli's gone to the front now to pace Lance Armstrong, which is interesting. Francesco Manthebo is there, and there we have in that light turquoise jersey Alexander Vinokurov, and behind him Jan Ullrich. They've just let Lance dictate the pace to them today, and the others have ran away with it. Well, is he going to win? Stay with us. Welcome back. This is the view at the finishing line, and we'll be here in about 30 minutes now, I would suspect, and I reckon Michael Rasmussen is going to be the man who comes charging down that straight in solitary splendour. It's beginning to look that way. What's the helicopter doing today? Here we are, and this is a nice view of our Trek aerial view, brought to you by Trek Lucky 7 Sweepstakes. Vive le Tour. Sort of an attempt at making the Eiffel Tower, I suspect. Wonder how they're going to get down. That's our Trek aerial view. And these are the legs from ground level of Christophe Moreau and Jens Voigt, who are actually losing ground to the leader. We're only talking seconds, but they are still falling back. The peloton, 8 minutes 37 seconds back. They're not really closing in either today. This has been an intriguing race day now as we come to a rest for 1 day only tomorrow, and then back in the saddle in the high mountains. Michael Rasmussen is going to feel pretty glad of that rest day tomorrow, having won all bar one of the climbs in the last 2 days of racing.
He really has laid down he's got almost a 40-point advantage over everybody else, and that really is going to be very difficult to match. And he will be there in the mountains because a man who can ride with this kind of form, Phil, is going to be with the leading groups when we go over the big mountains of the Alps next week.
It certainly looks like it. Mind you, you can pick up 40 points on one climb once we get out to the high mountains, like at the Pla d'Adet. But even so, he's got himself a great advantage today.
Paolo Salvadelli on the front here, followed there by Big George Hincapie. Armstrong will be very happy with the team here this afternoon. There's Rubiera going through, there is Popovic, and the man on Armstrong's wheel there is Ivan Bassa, the man who wears number 21. Armstrong looks very comfortable here, and I think he'll say a big word of thanks to the team here this afternoon. They may well lose the yellow jersey this afternoon, but I don't think that is all that important, because after all, Armstrong said before the start of the tour, after the team time trial, he didn't mind losing the yellow jersey for a day or so. The most important thing was to have it on the final day on the Champs-Élysées.
Just thinking what you're saying there, Paul. Yes, Voigt is a man now, looks the next CSC man to be in charge. And still it's the boys from Discovery enjoying life at the front. We've got all of the mountains of the day behind us today, but of course after the rest day tomorrow we're in the thick of the action. Let's have a look then at what's likely to be ahead of us weather-wise with our Crestor 3-day forecast. Tomorrow we're all asleep, as you can see, but it's full sun. What a great day to go to sleep. 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we have 2 days in the Alps, and they're the high mountains. Chances of Lance making a comeback? Well, we reckon it's excellent. Lance Armstrong looking today, we feel, to pass off the responsibility of the jersey, taking it back when the race resumes on Tuesday. And that is our forecast over the next 3 days, brought to us by Crestor. As Ulrich, number 11, sitting behind arch rival or friend, Vinokurov. Well, it looks as though CSC, Jens Voigt, will be the second leader of the Tour on this team now, after Dave Zabriskie. Zabriskie having passed away the lead during the team time trial, and now he's out of the race at 25 kilometres to go. These are the two chasers, and they're now at 6 minutes and 50 seconds. Incredible. Looking down to around about 25 kilometres point here. 6 minutes 50 to the, actually it's to 4 chasers, I think, because it's the breakaway which is split up. 3:56 to the 2 chasers, 6:50 to the rest of the group, 8:43 to the main field.
This has been, Phil, an incredible day's racing. Michael Rasmussen attacked the race after just 4 kilometres of the stage, and that is amazing to think that he would survive. I thought he would get himself some points, but I never imagined he was setting himself up for a breakaway of around about 167 kilometres of racing. It's remarkable. Team Discovery Channel don't seem to... Oh, looks as if there was somebody did go down there on the right-hand side. You've got to pay attention when you come into town in France, and it looked as if it was a Bouygues Telecom rider who went down quite hard there.
It was, and I think he might have hit that little obelisk in the centre of the road there. As usual, the doctors are very quickly on the scene. It was a Bouygues Telecom, Paul.
He went down very hard, and it was just actually avoiding that straw bale for protection that he went down extremely hard, and he looks a little bit winded there as we go by him.
I think it's Jerome Pinot, but I'm not going to be absolutely certain at the moment, but I think it's Pinot who's gone down.
Team car is up there alongside him. The mechanic will be there very quickly. Gerard Porte in the white shirt. There is the doctor on the Tour de France who's been around forever. He picked me up once or twice, and he's always the man to look after a bike rider.
He's always so quick. He's always there like a flash. No, it's not Pinot. I think it's Mathieu Sprick.
No, it's in fact, it's Didier Roos, the team leader. Yeah, the former 2-time champion of France. He doesn't know what happened. He's a very experienced bike rider, Didier Roos, and obviously he didn't know, he didn't see the sign when he came into town there. I think he's winded. I think he should be able to get back onto his machine, and if he can, he should be able to finish the race, and I'm not quite sure what Dr. Porte is doing there. He's pretty much compos mentis. Now, here's a problem. Now, who is this? I think this is Jens Voigt has had a problem.
It is Jens Voigt.
Yep, it's Jens Voigt.
Well, it's a good time to have a puncture. You've got to have one at all. Well, he's gone back into the race, and I'm sure... Well, where is Christophe Moreau?
Moreau is just up the road there. He will wait because he realises he needs the power of Jens Voigt. It's not worth leaving a powerhouse like Jens Voigt at the side of the road, so theoretically, the honour amongst thieves would say he'd better wait for him because they need to work together to try and stay away.
So, Jens Voigt having a problem. Didier Roos, by the way, in his 12th Tour de France, and first rode the Tour in 1994. He didn't finish stage number 7, though. And let's hope he gets going again today. Voigt is going to come back up, I think. We'll take a break. Rejoin us. Here we go now. The leader is under 20 kilometres to go. The peloton have just gone under 25 kilometres to go. That's all going to all well now for the rider out front, Michael Rasmussen. There's Yoshiba Bolocki, still up in the move here again today. Our little yellow jersey, Lance Armstrong, 8:16, and I think losing yellow today. I don't think it'll be a disaster, and I think it might be a voluntary move by Armstrong. This is poor old Didier Roos, took a very nasty fall there as he hit the central median strip in his 12th Tour de France. He was disqualified along with the rest of the Festina riders. They're back in 1998. but he has finished 11th in the Tour since then, in the year 2001. Very solid French professional. He's been national road race champion of France. Well, as we look down in the bunch, doesn't look very big, does it? There's the chasers. Let's just catch up now with our famous Lance 25 moments brought to us by BMW. And we're going to take a look this time at what we think is number 13 of the 25. The World Championship. We go back a long way for this. First full season as a professional for Lance Armstrong in 1993 in Norway, the day after Jan Ullrich had won the amateur world title. And don't forget, you can vote for your top 5 favourite moments from our 25 by coming on board at olntv.com. That's our BMW Lance 25 moment. This rider now, Michael Rasmussen, I think can begin to dream of a stage win as well. 4 minutes 11 seconds. He is riding virtually at the same speed as the two chasers, probably a fraction quicker.
This man is a beast of a bike rider. He's a great tough man. He had a long career as a mountain biker. And looking at the way he's riding here on the road, Phil, I'm pretty glad that he'd swapped across to the road racing discipline.
Yeah, well, he's ridden brilliantly today, which is a long time. With this breakaway is virtually start to finish today. About 2 kilometres down the road, the attack started. He went out in front because the top of the first climb was after only 6 kilometres. He was already on his own. You're right about the organisation coming from Team Cofidis here, Paul. They've got a little bit of a feeling they might have somebody to deliver for what will be, well, only 7th place at the moment, of course. They've got to pick up the chasers in between.
Well, the chasers are going to get caught very shortly because they're only around about a minute in front of this group, and I'm sure they will pick them up. There you go, confirmation. It's 1 minute and 9 seconds coming through. So I should think they will catch that group that's caught in no man's land before the finish line, but certainly they don't seem to be denting the lead of Michael Rasmussen or Jens Voigt and Christophe Moreau. Cedric Vasseur, by the way, is having a bit of a hard time because his heart rate has climbed up to around about 171. Ouch.
Well, he's working hard. And, oh, look at that lovely steam train. It's a saddle tank, is it?
Well, you're the expert.
I don't know.
Did you get its number?
It's got a tailwind and all that. 15 kilometres to go for the man out front now, and it is virtually a ride of glorious honour here for Michael Rasmussen. He's got his flotilla of motorbikes, the race director. He's got one team car with him, and he's got the whole road ahead of him, and the peloton can do nothing about it. They are now 101 behind the remnants of the breakaway that never could catch up with Michael Rasmussen today. Very soon it'll be him, 2 chasers in the bunch. That's the way it's going to come down to the finish, it looks like now. Rasmussen, the concentration on that road in front. Moving to the right-hand gear lever just to shift it across. That's how you shift your gears, on the brake lever. And Rasmussen won't look too happy because he's concentrating at the moment, and that's more important as he keeps the effort on here. Michael Rasmussen bound for home. There's the remnants of the breakaway. They just got swept up. There's a couple in front. You're looking at the rear of the peloton. It's a little bit smaller than normal. There's only about 50-60 riders here today. But they are making the way at approximately 8 minutes, slightly less, 7:53 now behind the lone leader. They're closing in. Didier Roos has just got back in. There he is. He's had his chin bandaged. Nasty cut there. I think stitches will be required at the finishing line, but he's got to get to the finish. These are the 2 chasers here now, and they have gone under 15 kilometres to go. Jens Voigt and Rasmussen. And I beg your pardon, Moreau. 7:53, 10 kilometres for the leader, Paul. 6 miles. He's going to win.
He's going to win, but the question is, Phil, what is going to be his advantage when he gets himself down to the finish line? That's the big question.
Well, we peer along the road here. We're just on 10 kilometres from the finish. Michael Rasmussen, there's a brilliant former mountain biker, has been away from start to finish today. Give him the benefit of the first kilometre when he was probably in the bunch. It has been an incredible day of racing, and they're not going to catch him now before the finish.
Well, if he survives, and I'm pretty sure he's going to survive now, that will make a 167-kilometre breakaway. That is phenomenal, especially when you look at the race profile, Phil, because we started the day off with 3 very difficult climbs. There were 2 third categories, a second category, but then the first category of the Ballon d'Alsace surely was the hardest.
We've just seen the banner ahead, so we can tick off another mileage count, I think, once we get to it, as he makes it. So it's the 10 kilometres to go, and that is for, I thought we'd passed under it, but it wasn't quite there, but we're there now. 10 kilometres to go. Well, we're seeing some great racing, and don't forget, you can catch OLN's expanded coverage of today's stage later on tonight. The day's recap, rider interviews, expert analysis, and we'll prepare you for when the race resumes on Tuesday in the Alps. We do have a programme tomorrow, I will remind you. In OLN's Tour de France expanded primetime coverage, that will come to you tonight at 8 Eastern and 9 Pacific. Here on OLN, the Tour de France goes on. And this man goes on and on and on. He's had one man visit him for a short while, Dario Cioni, and then Cioni couldn't master the pace, so he fell back. Other than that, he's been on his own all day. The peloton is at 7:54. The riders in the main group, I think, are seeing a change of leadership today, because Jens Voigt still chases, but he's losing ground at 4:16, but they're still to the good by 3.5 minutes over the peloton. Now, Jens Voigt only needs to get in with about 40 seconds lead on the peloton to be the next leader of the Tour de France. Well, the cameraman there getting a good close look at Michael Rasmussen. We can get a good close look at his frame and at his legs. This could be a back-to-back stage win for the team Rabobank today, because they won yesterday by 1/10,000th of a second for Peter Weening. Now they're going to win by a clear margin for this rider, Michael Rasmussen. We're going to know soon. Stay with us for the finish. Welcome back. We're looking here at the 2 chasers. They've just gone under 10 kilometres. Michael Rasmussen's just gone through 7.5 kilometres. No mathematician required. They are 2.5 kilometres now behind the leader. They are not going to catch this man, who broke away from the minute the race started and is now running for the finish. It'll be his first ever victory in the Tour de France. The clock will decide the destiny of the yellow jersey, and we think at the moment it will go to Jens Voigt, because the peloton with Lance in it is riding at 7 minutes and 53 seconds. Nice smile here from Thomas Voeckler as he gets himself back into the group, but he's had his ups and downs today.
Certainly had his ups and downs. I think he suffered a lot over the slopes of the Ballon d'Alsace, but he will be very happy indeed that he's in the front group now.
And there's the champion of France down there. The champion of France just coming on to the back of the field. The 2 chasers now 2.5 kilometres behind the man who's leading, Michael Rasmussen. Voigt still dreaming of yellow, the rider in black and white, because he's still got the time in hand over the peloton, which is lingering today. 7:53 behind the leader. 4 minutes, 1 second back to these 2 riders. Puts him some 3 minutes ahead of Lance Armstrong. He only needs 1, less than.
Less than. He only needs, currently, if we were to stop the race here, 50 seconds, but that doesn't take into account the time bonuses on the finish line. But when you look here at these 2 riders have made a fairly brilliant escape. I love the style of Jens Voigt. It's not the most stylish position on a bike, but it just emanates, and you can almost see the energy and the power that this man from Germany is developing.
Well, they're on the main road approach into Mulhouse now. They've done their laps of the Vosges Mountains and the Black Forest, and one man has led them all the way around today. Michael Rasmussen has triumphed over the mountains in the manner of the Tour's great climbers. Now he's going to finish it off with a flourish in his second Tour. He's about to introduce us to his first Tour stage win.
That's a great week for Rabobank. They've basically won their Tour de France here, because they're 2 men who've never won stages in the Tour de France, again, winning for the first time over this weekend. It really is a great performance by that team, and they've had some hard times over the past, but they've stood by their sponsorship, a sponsorship that in fact embraces every aspect of the sport, whether it be the track side, whether it be mountain biking or male or female road racing. They support the whole sport in Holland. Now they're reaping the benefit.
Good for them too. They've always put a team here that would win stages, but not the race itself or the King of the Mountains. Now they've differed completely with that attitude. 5 kilometres to race to the finish, 3 miles for Michael Rasmussen. Every time he sees a banner now, he's going to put his head down and drive, because they tick them off now, 1 every kilometre.
Well, just looking at Michael Rasmussen here, he's gone inside of 5 kilometres to go. I think the pain has probably drifted a little bit to the back of his mind now, because he knows over the last 500 metres he's going to be able to enjoy the victory here this afternoon. Only won on 4 separate occasions previously on the road in his career. Phil, he won himself a pretty impressive stage at Cotaré in the Tour of Spain a couple of years ago, but this has got to be his greatest win.
Well, no question, and he's now a clear leader of 2 of the King of the Mountains. 10 kilometres to go for the peloton. We'd almost forgotten about them. 7 minutes 50 is the current time gap now, and Lance Armstrong, I think he'd be very pleased with the way his team has ridden today after yesterday's somewhat disastrous ride when they all left him and he rode away in the lead group on his own, isolated him as it were. Now, of course, he's got the team organised mentally as well as physically once again, so they'll have a peaceful rest day tomorrow. He won't be unhappy if the yellow jersey goes to Jens Voigt. Voigt has ridden many tours. He is not a final winner because he can't climb the big mountains. Lance knows that. This is another shrewd move to move on the Golden Fleece and get the pressure off his shoulders.
These kilometres are ticking away now for Michael Rasmussen. You know, he's clocking these kilometres off at a time of around about 1 minute and 12 seconds. But for the man who's in 2nd or 3rd place on the road, Jens Voigt there, if he finishes in 2nd place behind Michael Rasmussen, he only needs 38 seconds ahead of Lance Armstrong's group to win the yellow jersey. I don't think it's going to come back to 38 seconds because we're still looking at minutes.
Right, and that's because of the small time bonuses Voigt has earned along the road today, because he was starting the day 1 minute exactly behind Armstrong overall. And now Michael Rasmussen is set for now to carry on towards the finish. Michael Rasmussen, a massive crowd on a wide boulevard. We're on the outskirts of Mulhouse now. And listen to the crowd shouting him on every inch of the way. Allez, 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 keep going, go for it. Every language, it's all on the barriers now. And they're seeing a Danish rider run for home.
Running for home here, and just made a quick time check, Phil, on that last kilometre that he did. He did it in 1 minute and 15 seconds, and that is having been at the front of the race for 165 kilometres. I really don't know where he's getting his power from. He's being driven on today by an incredible mental force, because his body will be screaming out for the white flag to go up in surrender, but it will not stop. His body will not stop feeling that pain for another 3 kilometres. Well, actually, it's about 2.5.
Just listen now, his head's rocking and rolling here. He's seeking in this wide boulevard the shortest way around every corner, because every inch will count now. These boys are not getting closer. Well, they are nudging a little bit closer now. They've got inside 4 minutes at the moment. 3:41 to the chaser, so they've got 20 seconds back. 7:37 to the peloton. They're worried about the chase from Armstrong. He's worried about the chase from the whole field.
Everybody's worried about everything else apart from the sprinters today, who are going to have to take a back seat, because we got a time check to the group of Tom Boonen just recently, and Tom Boonen's group was at least 20 minutes behind this group on the road. It's a big chase now for Jens Voigt. Look at the power there. He's rolling the top half of his body, trying to find as much power as he can to stay at least 38 seconds off the front of Lance Armstrong's group. If he finishes in 3rd place, he needs to finish 42 seconds ahead of the yellow jersey group. I think he's got enough in hand to do that.
Look at these two now, desperate. A little word now, a little nod. Will we work together? I wonder what Morrow said then, but they both agreed, and it was to get on with it, I think, and probably saying, look, no finessing, let's race for the line. 2 kilometres to go now for the man, and I think, Paul, I might be wrong, I don't think a Danish rider has ever won a stage of the Tour de France since Rolf Sørensen back in 1996 when he won at Superbest.
Apart from that guy who was a hamburger and got fried.
Oh, I forgot about Bo Hamburger. Where did he win?
It was a long way over towards the western part of France. It was a very hot day on that occasion, and he took off very early on. But this man...
Yeah, but that was 2 years before Sorensen. That was in Tresilliac in 1994, so I'm staying with Sorensen.
Okay, you go with Sorensen.
There's the leader now.
Yeah, what about Jakob Peel in 2003?
Oh, yes, OK, I'll give you that one. Jakob Peel.
Doesn't matter. This is a great performance. It doesn't matter who was the last Dane to win, because we know now that the last Dane to win is going to be this man we're looking at here.
Yes, Danny Marseille, Jakob Peel. He was on the cut. He never made the team this year for CSC, left at home. And now he can watch this on television. The next Danish winner of a stage of the Tour de France and a big leader in the King of the Mountains, because Michael Rasmussen is so clearly tired now. He's got to feel the adrenaline course through those veins just for a little bit longer. These streets now, as he heads to the kilometre, he is 1,000 metres away from almost an all-day breakaway over the mountains of the Black Forest and the Vosges. What a breakaway, what a fantastic performance.
He went out this morning, really, Phil, with only one thing in the back of his mind, to try and get as many points as possible in the King of the Mountains classification. I can't really believe that he thought he was going to ride away from the main field for 167 kilometres of this 171 kilometre stage, but he's done it. He's into the final straight now. Very shortly, the road is going to straighten up in front of him, and he will see the banner over the finishing line.
Well, what a great moment. His second Tour de France. He did nothing but finish 14th last year. We hardly mentioned him. This year he's back. Leader of the King of the Mountains yesterday. Today a winner of the stage. He can stand by to enjoy this, throw away a few seconds and wave to the crowd. It has been an exhibition of terrific bike riding over all of the mountains of this region in first place. He won all the prizes along the route except one small prize. He gave that to the rider who dared to join him for a short distance, and then he dispatched him back to the field. It's a little bit of a lonely ride, but he should start to feel good pretty much now, as this massive crowd in Mulhouse cheer him all the way home.
It's a corridor of noise that this rider is going through, urging him up to the finishing line. They realise how brave this man has been here this afternoon. They realise what an effort he's had to put in to survive off the front on a very difficult day through the Vosges.
For nearly 4.5 hours, they've watched him on the television at the finishing line. Now they can see him in person as he salutes the crowd. He gets his first ever stage win. He could not have imagined that was the way it was going to be when he left around midday today from the town of Jaromir.
Well, now we have to wait for Jens Voigt to come in with his compatriot for the afternoon, Christophe Moreau. And I've just cast my mind back and forgotten that for many, many years, Moreau and Voigt rode for the same Crédit Agricole team. The time difference between them at the moment is around about 3.5 minutes. But what a victory for this young man here. What a way to get a foundation for a lead in the King of the Mountains classification as we go a little bit further out now to Christophe Moreau and Jens Voigt. And I'm sure Jens Voigt will try and get himself second place and the 12-second time bonus.
That's what he'll want, but Moreau is also a pretty good sprinter. It'll be an interesting one. There's the celebrations, though, back at the finishing line, as Michael Rasmussen can forget the pain now and take a little bit of a rest. Wow, that was a ride and a half in the great style of somebody like Fausto Coppi, Eddie Merckx, or dare I say it, Lance Armstrong.
Brilliant performance now as we go back to second and third place rider on the road, and still a long way back is the main field, which contains all of the favourites. The last time check we got, it was around about 7.5 minutes. If Jens Voigt finishes in second place, he only needs 38 seconds ahead of the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong, and the clock is still ticking. It's a minute and a half since Rasmussen crossed the finishing line, and these two riders now can finally see what they've been dreaming about for a long time, the red kite of the last 1,000 metres.
They will cross the line just on 3 minutes behind the winner today. They never really clawed him back all day. They rode at almost the same speed. They're going to work to the line because they want time over Lance Armstrong. They cannot finesse who gets second, almost immaterial. They want time because they don't know how it will pan out when the Alps start on Tuesday.
You're right, second or third is not important at all to these riders. It's the time between them as they cross the finishing line and the front end of the main field when they come in around about 3 minutes time. And Jens Voigt wants that. He is looking at the end of that road. Actually, you know, he can't see the finishing banner. All he can see is a big yellow jersey, and it's got his name all over it.
So they race up towards the line now. Every last ounce of energy here from Christophe Moreau as he drives towards the finish, because he could climb alongside Armstrong in the Alps, and I think he believes that, so he wants every second he can take right now. I think we're looking at the yellow jersey sat behind him, but that depends on how fast it takes the bunch to get in. We drive up to the finishing line now. I don't think Jens is going to even try to go by him as they come to the line. Christophe Moreau, the Frenchman, has certainly found his old form again. They used to be teammates, as Paul has said. They're now rivals, but I think today they're teammates again as they come up to the line. 3 minutes has passed by on the clock, and Christophe Moreau takes second. Voigt is third. The clocks have started now. Let's wait for Armstrong. So the first three are in. The yellow jersey time starts now. We know it is going to take minutes. Here they come. They're a little bit out of town yet. We are going to take a break, but we will be back in time to see who is the next rider in yellow in the Tour de France. Well, this is the sprint now. There's a bunch are in town here, and it's going to be a desperate finish because Stuart O'Grady, one of the men in the green jersey competition, has got back into the group. The others haven't. Hushoff, De Boon and McEwen are not here. He's going to make the most of this. He will get fourth on the stage, a massive points. That will move him up the overall classification. That's a big score for Stuart O'Grady. But the hot news is Lance Armstrong is out of the yellow jersey, and Jens Voigt is the next leader of the Tour de France. So let's have a look as we now can see O'Grady gets that. This is what happened a few minutes ahead of the peloton, and I think Jens Voigt celebrating there before he knew the actual times, but he knew there as Christophe Moreau congratulated him as the next leader of the Tour. Well, that was a superb sprint by Stuart O'Grady. He was in trouble on the Ballon d'Alsace, but he got over that. He came into the group. His team did a good job. They brought him to the line. He gets fourth in the green jersey competition when the others got nothing. He did profit by that today. Stuart's such a crafty bike rider and such a great tactician.
Well, you know, he nearly stayed with them yesterday on the final few kilometres of the Col de la Chute, and he thought he was going to. It was just at 4 kilometres to go that he was blown out today. He really must have tried.
Well, there's the rider. He looks as though he's unhappy, but believe me, he's the happiest man in France right now. Michael Rasmussen finishing clear of the field as he takes the stage win, the first for Denmark for about 4 years. There is the Pacific Life stage results. Rasmussen alone all day finishes in solitary splendour at 3:04 ahead of Moreau and Voigt. 6:04 back to the peloton with Stuart O'Grady leading home all of the men we think who matter in this year's Tour de France. As you look at the top 10 there, champion of Austria, Glomser in 10th place. And in this, of course, too, Lance Armstrong. Normally doesn't take part in the sprint, so I don't really expect to see him in the listings, but it's the time on the right that counts, all getting the same time. Chris Horner there, continuing a great tour, 13th for him. George Hincapie, 18th. There's the top 20, all timed at the same gap, 6 minutes and 4 seconds. That's a significant time today. So it just means that Lance Armstrong a bit further down in the group, but he too will receive that same 6 minutes and 4 second time gap. That's a huge margin over the field. At one stage they were almost 10 minutes behind, and frankly they didn't regain all that much either as they chased off the mountain of the Ballon d'Alsace. All right, well, let's see if we can now have a look at the Foster's general classification. There it is, Jens Voigt, the new leader of the Tour de France as we take a rest tomorrow. Moreau is the man who's up into second. Lance Armstrong down to third, 2 minutes 8 seconds behind as we go to the Alps. Michael Rasmussen in the end comes up into fourth. Alexander Vinokurov goes from third down to fifth. He's 3 minutes 20 behind Jens Voigt. What a super escape it's turned out to be for Voigt, Moreau and Rasmussen today. Look again at this sprint of the peloton. as we find Stuart O'Grady read it absolutely perfect. His two teammates led him out. Then they moved aside. He was launched at the finishing line, and he's taken a fine 4th place. So in the green jersey competition, he's going to be probably up into 3rd place tonight. And that's important points because no other sprinter scored at all today. So well done to very, very shrewd Stuart O'Grady. He must have suffered though. Looking down here now on the town of Mulhouse, which is right in the corner of France, and we can see Germany and Switzerland as the riders now get a right nice warm down before presentation. And what we'll do is we will take a break now as we catch up with the riders after the break. They're behind the screens getting ready for the prize presentation. I don't think Lance Armstrong will be too unhappy at having lost his lead in the Tour de France. It means he can go into the mountains now fighting from behind. We'll take a break and then we'll bring you all the hot news from the Tour de France right after this. See you in a moment.
Help me! Will somebody please help me? Someone stole my Visa check card.
Oh, lady. Read my lips. If your Visa check card's lost or stolen, you're not liable for fraudulent charges.
And all that money will be put back in your checking account. Sheesh.
Signing with a Visa check card is super, super safe.
There's no need to fear. Underdog.
Never mind.
Well, welcome back now to the Tour de France, and down there is Mulhouse, and the man on the top of the leaderboard now is the German rider Jens Voigt. The last time he was there, 2001, he kept the race lead just for a day. Well, he can have it tomorrow without any pressure because it's a rest day in the Tour de France, and then he'll be back in action in the Alps, of course, and that is going to be the high mountains of the race. We go over the highest mountain pass in the Alps, the Col de Glibier this year. So, as Voigt is taking the yellow, and of course he is the top man, let's face it, and he's now got the next maillot jaune of the Tour de France. We began to think it wouldn't happen. This is how he set about. Good as his word, he attacked very early on today. Michael Rasmussen there sitting on his wheel. Rasmussen eventually going away on his own. This was in the first 2 kilometers of the day's race. Rasmussen looking over his shoulder, seeing where the gaps are. And shortly after these shots, he was off up the road, never to be seen again by anyone except Dario Cioni, who fell back. But Jens Voigt persevered. He was in a group of 6 for most of the way. Then he reduced that group on the Ballon d'Alsace to 2. He even had a flat tyre when they were down to 2. But Christophe Moreau, a former teammate of Jens when they were on the same team, waited for him. Jens came racing back, and that was a wise move because 2 can ride quicker than 1. And Moreau, once he was locked on, they just moved away together again. They didn't lose much time with that puncture. They didn't gain any either, of course, on Michael Rasmussen. He won the day, but that was it. You see the signal there from Jens Voigt. He knew he had more than the 40-odd seconds he needed to lead the Tour de France off Lance Armstrong. Well, it's been a long, hard day for some riders. I think, though, Lance Armstrong had a slightly easier day, just marshalling affairs. There's the man who won the stage today. He led from that attack, leaving Jens Voigt right to the end. First ever stage win, second Tour de France, first by a Danish cyclist since Jakob Piel won in Marseille 4 years ago. The pain is over. Give me some tea. So that's the story of the day as we roll now to the rest day in the Tour de France. Don't forget, we have a regular program for you tomorrow, of course. We'll look back over 9 stages of the Tour de France. What a great 9 stages, too, we have seen. Well, you can probably hear the music going on out there as the riders now get ready for the podium. First up should be Michael Rasmussen. He's going to pay 2 visits there today as stage winner and as leader in the King of the Mountains. It's been a great day out for the riders other than the French and the Americans for a change. There he is, 31 years of age, came to the Tour de France late because he was a brilliant mountain bike rider, former world champion he was. Now he is the champion of the Tour de France, at least today.
A brilliant performance, Phil. I know he went out to try and get himself points, and I'm sure in the back of his mind he never expected to put in an escapade like that, because you don't plan those kind of escapades. Nobody expects to ride a long way on their own in a race like that. But what he did was superb. 167 kilometers, congratulated there by Bernard Hinault, himself no mean attacker when it comes to racing.
So let's have a look at the Pacific Life Stage results then. Confirmed now, Rasmussen 3-4 ahead of Morrow, same time as Jens Voigt. Then came Stuart O'Grady 3 minutes later at 6:04, leading home the Belgian rider on the French team, Philippe Gilbert. We had the heart monitor on him today, and he looked pretty excited when he got 5th place on the stage, so that was a pretty good result for him. Further down, interesting results these. Laurent Brochard taking 8th, Gerrit Glomser, the Austrian champion, in 10th, all the same time now. Lance Armstrong not in the top 20, but gets the same time. That's all that matters right now. Stefano Garzelli was 11th today, and Chris Horner continues his great first Tour de France with 13th today. George Hincapie 18th, top 20 completed by Nicolas Portal, the Frenchman. Let us go down to the podium now. Look at this, all smiles. One of the most popular men in the world of cycling, Jens Voigt of Germany, has been in this position only once before for a day in his life. Now he's there again, the Maillot Jaune, the Tour de France, and he's taken it off the hottest property in the race, Lance Armstrong. What a lovely surprise for Jens and for Team CSC. Remember, with Dave Zabriskie, who sadly abandoned the race today, tears from the team have been turned to joy tonight as the team has recaptured the Maillot Jaune vacated by Zabriskie when he crashed in the team time trial, and now Zabriskie has vacated the race. Now let's have a look at the overall classification as Bernard Hinault congratulates Jens. This is Foster's presenting the GC. He has a lead of 1:50 over Moreau, 2:18 now over Lance, who goes down to 3rd, 2:43 over the hero of the day, Rasmussen, up to 4th. Alexander Vinokourov looking for 3:20 in the Alps as he's gone down from 3rd into 5th place. Further down, Bobby Julich is making this All-American Tour, keeping these boys right in position. He is in 6th on the same team as Jens Voigt. Ivan Basso on the same team as Jens Voigt is 7th. CSC are having a good race. Jan Ullrich is in 8th at 3:54. Completing the top 10 places, George Hincapie. He's been as high as 2nd, hangs on to 10th, 4:05. This man really did cause everyone a few problems today. We'll be back with more in a moment. Well, the city of Mulhouse doesn't see the Tour de France too often, and it doesn't see a race like this anywhere in the Tour de France. It was a brilliant race today. Lance Armstrong, I think, has proven to us all he's pulled the team back together, and he knows now he still has a great team around him, and he won't be upset he has lost the leader's yellow jersey, will he?
Well, he'd said actually since the team time trial he wasn't going to be upset if he lost the jersey for a couple of days, because he said the most important thing, Phil, is to have the yellow jersey on the last day, on the 24th of July.
All right, well, I can hear the music down there, so I think we can go down and see the polka dot jersey come out. There he is. Looks a very happy man. Second visit to the podium now for Michael Rasmussen. 2 days, only one climb was beaten by somebody else, and that was yesterday on the Col de la Schlucht. He's won all of the rest. Bernard Hinault standing just behind him there to make sure he's got the jersey on straight. And this is a wonderful, wonderful return by a great bike rider.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bernard Hinault will appreciate the performance put in by this man today, because to attack after just 2.5 miles or 4 kilometers of racing,
look at this.
That really is. The Blaireau, the Badger himself, understands what that man went through today.
You very rarely see Bernard Hinault show emotion like that. He appreciated very much the brilliant ride today of Michael Rasmussen.
He certainly did. That was not a gift. That wasn't a giveaway at all. He took that race today, Phil, by the horns.
All right, well, we'll continue our coverage, of course, but coming up next will be the 25 most dangerous places up next in Countdown. That's here on OLN after our live coverage of the Tour de France. Well, the race racing today started early, and when the riders broke away early on, I really thought the field was going to be spread-eagled all across the mountains. Everybody was in desperate trouble. But fortunately, Armstrong and his boys seem to have brought out a little bit of common sense, got the field back together again. This man, though, was having none of it. He won it. When we come back, we'll be with Al and Bob to tell us what they think of this great stage today of the Tour de France. See you in a moment.
Sometimes the spoils of success do nothing but spoil you.
Wow, this time, Bontrager Race X-Lite wheels.
Bissell lift-off vacuum cleaner. Not even my Maganga can help me.
Never mind Bob. You can be lucky enough to win Lance's gear every day of the tour. Play Trek Lucky 7 Scratch and Win at your local Trek dealer and online at trekbikes.com. Every day can be your lucky day, so scratch and win with Trek.
Welcome back to Malouse, France, the finish line for today's Stage 9. Post-race, lots to talk about things that happened and things that didn't happen. By the way, Malouse was recently cited as the crime capital of France. We don't have to worry about that. We're getting out of here tonight. Why didn't we see the same types of attacks today that we saw yesterday?
I think it's because the Discovery team was able to reassert its dominance. The athletes feeling a lot better. I think they were very upset overnight to have isolated Lance Armstrong on the last climb of yesterday's stage. Today, there was no trouble at all for them to control the field. A little bit extra incentive. And I think that before the race, months before the tour ever started, they looked at this stage as being a very tough one and were ready mentally. I think that's the main difference we saw from yesterday to today, that they had already prepared themselves as helpers of Lance Armstrong to put in a big effort today.
Every day in our coverage, we keep track of what the American riders are doing. One of them we didn't expect to be talking about very much when this tour began, but we were at the end of the first day when David Zabriskie won the individual time trial, beating Lance Armstrong by 2 seconds to grab the yellow jersey. Then he lost the yellow jersey when he crashed in the team time trial, and today, after crashing again, he finally abandoned the race. He spoke to Frankie Andreu today after that was all said and done.
David, a very rough day yesterday, and today you had high hopes of being able to get through the stage. Can you take me through first 10 or 15 kilometers until you ended up having to stop, and what was going through your head when you did end up having to stop the Tour de France?
I don't even know if I made it 10 or 15 kilometers today. I got through yesterday hoping that I could get through today and get to the rest day and recover, but my body's just not recovering the way it used to, and I just have an overall extremely bad feeling in my whole body, and it wasn't a happy moment for me to drop out with all the cameras around me and watching me, and that's like a bad moment in my life. So it's not a happy time. But
can you pinpoint what in your body is not going right, or why you think that you didn't have the power that you were looking for?
Yeah, I can't pinpoint it. It's not necessarily the parts that I crashed on. It's just the heavy breathing, and really I can't go as deep as I normally can.
Looking back, have you had a chance to look back and kind of realize what you've accomplished? I mean, being the only American to win a stage in all 3 Grand Tours, and especially coming in here, winning that first day, have you thought about and been able to appreciate the fact that you were the first American to wear the yellow jersey in the 2005 Tour?
Yeah, I've thought about it, but not a lot yet. So I think, if anything, that'll help me, deal with what happened today and yesterday. Those were good times, and it's amazing how fast I was way up here and way down here. It's a crazy sport.
And your plans now? I mean, you did the Giro. You've had a long season, Tour de France. Will you be able to maybe take some time off? Or are you thinking about going home, or continue racing until a few more months over here in Europe?
Yeah, I'll do the Vuelta again. Just kidding. I don't know what I'll do. I need to talk to the management here and make some decisions and plans. But for me personally, I would like to try for the World Championships in Madrid.
All right, thanks, David. Unbelievable job here.
Thank you. Bye.
So David Zabriskie's first Tour de France is done. He's got a lot of cycling to go at the age of 26. He's won stages in the Tour of Italy, the Tour of Spain, the U.S. national time trialing champion. We saw a glimpse of that ability on the opening day of the Tour de France. You know, the Tour de France is just something you have to go through and experience everything, including how a team functions.
Yes, absolutely. For Dave Zabriskie, I honestly believe that his team let him down. This is a young athlete, obviously very talented, wins the first stage time trial. This is not a prologue, a lucky win with changing conditions. He took the win away from Lance Armstrong. So you have a very talented bike racer in the yellow jersey. You have to do everything you can as a team to take care of a rider like that. He couldn't pinpoint what was wrong with him physically. And when the mind goes, the body is soon to follow. And I think he just lost his morale, being abandoned there on the side of the road in a heap, bleeding in the yellow jersey. And that is a terrible way for Team CSC to treat this young man. And so he doesn't feel bad about it. And sometimes when you're that deep in the sport, you can't see what other people on the outside see looking in. So I think Dave Zabriskie, after he has a chance to come home, collect his thoughts, get back on the bike. This is a very talented athlete, and let's hope the best for Dave Zabriskie, but his Tour de France is over.
He looks so sad coming across the finish line in that yellow jersey, but that's the scenario you're talking about. What is the deflation feel of giving up something that you clearly wanted to finish?
The worst moment in your career as a bicycle racer is to drop out of the Tour de France. That happened to me one time, and it's just absolutely miserable. It's the worst day of your career. You can't think about it. You're so desperate to stay in the group and carry on day in and day out. Dave Zabriskie just couldn't do that. He didn't have enough morale, and started with the yellow jersey and ended up on the side of the road dropping out of the bike race. So the Tour, it asks its athlete to experience the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows, and Dave Zabriskie has definitely gone through that in his first Tour.
We'll take a break in our post-Stage 9 coverage here on OLN. More to talk about, and we'll do that when we come back. Michael Rasmussen wins Stage 9. Lance is out of the yellow jersey. Implications and more. Well, Lance Armstrong's been talking about it ever since he put on the yellow jersey in this Tour de France. The possibility of letting someone else have the responsibility until the mountains hit, and then they can execute their strategy. Talking of team discovery, of course. Jens Voigt was someone who seemed to be, even a few days ago, the right man in the right position. He's not a mountain monster. He's a great sprinter, and he is the man today for Team CSC. He spoke to us about the yellow jersey just a few minutes ago.
It's not your first time in the yellow jersey. This is your second time. Is it sweeter the second time?
It's definitely really good because, yeah, you know, your career, you have ups and downs. And since we had a different strategy this year, a lot of people already asking me, hey Jens, what happened to you? Like, you never attack anymore, and now I can show, hey, you see, I'm there. And I did a good échappée today.
You were with Christophe Moreau for much of the day trying to catch Rasmussen. Were you surprised that you weren't able to bring back the time on him to possibly even go for that stage win?
Yeah, I mean, he actually put time into us, you know. That was a really impressive ride by him. I mean, he's a Tour de France favorite for me now. And yeah, he had a really strong ride, and he deserved that stage win more than anybody else, I guess. And yeah, Moreau was a really good partner. He was strong, and he can ride at a steady pace, really nice. And I was really happy and really thankful that he waited for me when I had this mechanical problem there. That was more than fair, and yeah, that saved my day.
All right, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's the man in yellow. Tomorrow is a rest day, and if you can believe it, the cyclists do cycle on their rest day. No stage racing, however. We've got, however, something for your tour fix. A complete recap tomorrow night on our rest day show. Then we've got Stage 10, amazing climbs, especially the last one to Courchevel. Live coverage Tuesday morning at 8:30 on the East Coast, 5:30 on the West Coast, and every night of the tour, expanded coverage in primetime, 8 p.m. East, 9 p.m. on the West Coast. Michael Rasmussen wraps it up. Back-to-back days of stage success for Rabobank. Our OLN team fitted by LL Bean. Go to llbean.com. And for more on our tour coverage and all of OLN's programming, go to olntv.com. Coming up next, it's Countdown 25, the 25 most dangerous places on Earth. The podium in yellow, that's a good place. See you tomorrow.